Hello everyone. Welcome to the Ocean Sound Storytelling Channel. I am the storyteller, and today I am so happy to be with you. You may be curled up under a blanket or listening with your ears on a soft pillow. Wherever you are, whatever the time, thank you for being here. Before we begin with an interesting story, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so I know you enjoy relaxing moments like this. Where are you from? Send me a little hello in the comments. I would love to know which corner of the world you are listening from. Now, relax your body. Close your eyes and let the gentle waves take you into a gentle story, a little strange, a little mysterious, but warm enough to lull you to sleep all night long. So, are you ready? Tonight's story begins Friday the 13th. The storm had been brewing all day. An ominous black sky that only got darker as the hours passed. Perfect for a Friday the 13th, especially one in October. Flynn and I had been working all day at Rewind Rentals, the shop busy with locals picking up horror films to fuel their spooky movie marathons. Upstairs, at the Rewind Theater, we'd been showing a lineup of old school classics. Freddy Krueger, Halloween, even The Company of Wolves for the hardcore fans. I was setting up the projector in the small, cozy theater room, a bowl of popcorn resting against my hip. The audience, mostly townies who liked the idea of watching horror movies in the vintage ambiance of the theater, settled into their worn velvet chairs with drinks, candy, and buttery popcorn. Flynn had put together a killer playlist for the pre-show, layering eerie sounds between trailers for other horror films. The first jump scare in Halloween was coming up, just as the weather outside began to turn nasty. A sudden, deafening crack of thunder echoed through the building. Lightning illuminated the theater windows, and everyone jumped in their seats, right on cue with the movie. I couldn't help but laugh, the timing too perfect to be planned. The storm had really picked up, pouring rain rattling against the windows. It made the dim lights in the shop downstairs flicker, which I only noticed as I left the theater and headed back down. Flynn had snuck off a little earlier, saying something about grabbing the next movie for the queue. I descended the creaky stairs, the hum of the old films playing through the walls. Just as I reached the last step, lightning flashed again, and the room went momentarily white, followed by a boom of thunder that seemed to shake the very floor beneath me. I shook my head, grinning to myself. Flynn loved Friday the 13th, especially one as dramatic as this. "Flynn," I called out, stepping behind the counter to check the register, fully expecting him to pop out from some shadowy corner. And, of course, he did. He timed it just as another bolt of lightning struck. Diving out from behind a row of horror movies, with a loud "boo," I screamed, slapping his arm instinctively, and he burst into laughter, pulling me close before I could get away. His lips found mine in a soft, warm kiss. The contrast to the storm outside, making it feel all the more comforting. "You're too easy," Flynn teased, brushing his thumb over my cheek. Always so jumpy, I rolled my eyes, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened. "Yeah, well, I have a reason to be, especially on nights like this. Something weird always happens on Friday the 13th. I'm starting to think I'm cursed." Flynn raised an eyebrow, that familiar smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Oh? And what makes you say that?" I sighed, stepping back and leaning against the counter as I crossed my arms, the rain tapping against the windows behind me. "Okay, so remember last year when I was doing the end-of-day paperwork behind the desk?" He nodded, waiting for me to continue. I looked up, and there was this guy standing by the horror section, I said, feeling a little chill run down my spine at the memory. He was wearing this creepy mask, like one of those old porcelain doll faces, and just staring at me. Flynn's grin faded, his expression shifting from amused to something more serious. "Wait, what? Who was he?" "That's the thing. I don't know. I didn't hear the bell ring when he came in, and when I greeted him, he didn't say anything. He just kept watching me while he browsed the shelves." "Okay, that's seriously messed up," Flynn said, taking a step closer. "What happened after?" "Well, I kept trying to act normal, you know? Like maybe he was just one of those weird horror buffs who gets really into it." I shrugged, feeling the goosebumps rise on my arms. But then he was just gone. No bell, no nothing. One second he was there, the next he wasn't. "Jesus, Amelia, that's creepy as hell," Flynn muttered, looking around as if expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. "What the hell is wrong with people? Coral Cove is supposed to be safe." "Yeah, well, that's what I thought too. But every Friday the 13th, something strange happens." I glanced over at the old TV sets lining the back wall, one of them flickering ominously, as if the storm outside had seeped into the electronics. Flynn shook his head. "That's insane. Did you ever find out who it was?" "Nope. Never saw him again," I replied, my voice softer now. I even checked the cameras, but nothing. Flynn stared at me for a moment, clearly freaked out by the story. Before he could say anything else, another loud clap of thunder boomed through the shop, making the old bells on the door chime, just as the lightning flashed again. I froze for a split second, watching the window, and Flynn turned to look at the door. When he glanced back at me, his eyes widened, and he took a step back. Flynn let out a yell, nearly tripping over the counter stool in his panic. I couldn't help it. I burst into laughter. I had slipped on the same creepy mask from the back room, the one we kept for Halloween decorations. "You should have seen your face," I howled, tears of laughter streaming down my cheeks as I pulled the mask off. Priceless! Flynn clutched his chest, breathing heavily before shaking his head at me. "You're a menace," he said, stepping forward and wrapping his arms around me. "And I don't know why I put up with you," I grinned, tilting my head up to meet his gaze. "Because you love me," I teased. He rolled his eyes, but leaned down to kiss me again. The storm outside, a distant rumble compared to the warmth between us. "Yeah, I do," he murmured, pulling me closer. The rain kept falling. The thunder rolled. And in that small, cozy corner of Coral Cove, surrounded by dusty VHS tapes and flickering lights, we felt untouchable. No matter how cursed the night might be, the gates of hell are open night and day, smooth the descent, and easy is the way. Virgil. They all just sat there in the heat, and they waited. The kid came back. He was walking down the platform with his head hung low, sweat running down his pimpled face, like always. He was 16, but looked more like 13, short and skinny, with longish dark hair and a black eye. The black eye was always there. It never faded. He took a seat at the end of the bench with the others and looked down at his dirty old sneakers. "Roman. Same shit, little man?" The kid. "Yeah. Roman, I don't know why you even bother no more." They all just sat there in silence. "Sandra. It's so hot today." 3 of them looked at her. "Roman. Bitch. It's hot out here every day." "Sandra. I told you not to call me that." "Colonel Duval." "Roman, please." Roman gave a tiny chuckle and pulled the pack of Newports from his pocket and lit one up. That pack was always near to full. He exhaled some smoke and looked down the tracks into the distance where the rails slowly bent off into the trees and out of sight. Sandra wrinkled her nose and waved the smoke away. "Roman. Man, when this train gonna come?" "Brian. Why do you always ask that same question over and over?" "Roman. Yo, man. I already done told you to bite your tongue and stay over there, you strange-ass bitch. Don't make me get up. It's too hot for me to whip your ass right now, you silly-looking motherfucker." They all just sat there in silence. Colette fanned herself with the folded newspaper, looked down the tracks, and then handed it to the colonel, who did the same. Roman took one last drag on his cigarette and then flicked it at Brian seated at the end of the bench, bouncing it off his jeans and leaving a small horsetail of orange sparks in the air as it fell to the platform. Brian did not respond at all. Roman chuckled. The kid. "I'm gonna take a walk." Roman. "Seriously, man? Again? Is you retarded?" The kid. "Fuck off. I'm gonna take a walk. You can come with me if you want." Roman. "Nah, man. I'm good, shorty. You go off and wander. I'll be cooling it right here when you get back." The kid walked off down the platform towards the exit stairs, giving Roman, or maybe all of them, the finger with his right hand held over his narrow shoulders as he departed, not looking back. As he passed the thermometer mounted on the wall, the temperature read 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Always 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Always. Colette. "Can someone remind me how he got here?" "I know he's told me, but I just can't remember." Sandra. "Me neither." They all just quietly sat there in the heat for a while, Roman looking down the tracks every minute or two. He lit another Newport from the bottomless pack. Colette and Sandra both squinted and waved the smoke away. Brian looked up at the sky. Brian, how come the sun never sets? Colette. Sandra, I forgot how you got here too. I know we've discussed this before, but I just can't seem to remember these things. Sandra, I came home from a business trip early one day and found the car that belongs to my husband's 24-year-old secretary blocking the driveway. When I entered the house, I could immediately hear the sounds coming from the bedroom. I went to the stove and blew out the pilot light and turned up the gas. Then I lit a few candles on the dining room table, left the house, and drove my car halfway down the block and watched as it went up in flames a little while later. It's sad that my baby Jason was there in his crib at the time, but I really didn't want to be a single mother. That was in 1972. What year is this? Colette. Oh, that's right. That's just awful. Roman. Yo, do y'all ever plan to shut the fuck up? Making my head hurt over here. Colonel Duval. Roman. I must politely ask you once again to mind your language when speaking with the women. Roman gave him an angry stare and then flicked his cigarette butt out onto the tracks and used his black bandana to wipe the sweat off his forehead. Brian, are we ever going to get any food? When is the food coming? I'm hungry. Colette, I don't think we can get food here. Sandra. Colette, I forgot how you got here too. What awful thing did you do? Please remind me. Colette gave her an aggrieved stare for a moment, and then revealed a broad smile and answered in a flowery and friendly tone that could not have been less sincere. Colette, I didn't do anything awful, Sandra. Nothing like what you did. Your own child. Unthinkable. No, all I did was fulfill my Lord and Savior's will. When I was working in the hospital, if I saw in a patient's chart that she previously murdered an unborn child, well, I carried out God's will. I did this 6 times before they caught me. I wish it was 6,000. Sandra, I'm an atheist. Colette laughed during her brief reply. Colette, this is probably not the best place for you to cling to that silly notion, dummy. Sandra, go fuck yourself, Colette. They all went silent for a while. The heat was oppressive. There was no shade. There was no breeze. Brian, when are we going to get something to eat? Colonel Duval, son, I've been here far longer than any of you. I assure you, there will be no meals served. Brian, well, we all need water. Will we get some water at some point? The colonel ignored this query. After a while, Roman spoke up. Roman, yo, old man, remind me how you got here. Colonel Duval, I was in the war. At Antietam, we captured some rebel soldiers and we needed information about troop locations, numbers, armaments, that sort of intelligence. We did things to them to ensure that we got that information quickly, but later I was court-martialed and they hanged my commanding officer and myself in Washington for our war crimes. It was quite the scandal at that time. Roman, Antietam? Where that at, man? Iraq? Colonel Duval, no, son, that's in Maryland. Can you please remind me how you got here? I'm sorry. My memory is not what it once was. Roman, shot a few niggas. Colonel Duval, excuse me, son? Can you repeat that? Roman, yeah, I shot a few niggas just down the block from where I stay in Washington Heights. I've been running that corner for 3 years, and one day these little bitches show up and just set up shop and start serving my customers. It wasn't something I had to think about much. Shit. I also hit a delivery man bringing some cases of beer into the bodega on that corner. but I didn't mean to do that. He was just in that wrong place at the wrong time. Then I shot it out with the NYPD. It was pretty quick. I caught a few in my back and one in my neck. Anyways, man, that's how I got here. He pointed at the scar on his neck and then lit another cigarette. The kid was walking back down the platform, his olive drab green U.S. Army t-shirt heavily stained with sweat. The thermometer read 117 degrees Fahrenheit, as always. Sandra, can someone remind me how he got here? I can't seem to remember these things for long, for some reason. Colette. I don't recall either, but I'm sure he didn't burn his child to death. Sandra shot an angry look back at her, scowled and looked away, crossing her arms over her chest. Roman looked down the tracks. Sandra. Fuck you, Colette. Colette smiled, smugly. Roman. Man, when this train gonna come? Sandra. I do feel really bad about my son, Jason. I just didn't know what else to do in that moment. That's why I drove to the bridge afterwards. The kid took a seat at the end of the bench. Sandra. Hey kid, I'm sorry. Can you please remind us how you got here? The kid. I took my dad's pistol to school, and I shot a few bullies and this one asshole gym teacher. Then I shot myself. The kid never said very much. Roman. Same shit, little man? The kid. Yeah, I walked and ended up right back here, just like always. Felt like I was walking for 2 hours. Wish I had my iPhone. How long was I gone that time? Roman. I don't know, man. Maybe 4 or 5 minutes. You see anything new? The kid. Number. It doesn't matter which way I go. It's just a long, empty road, and then I pass by an empty high school that looks just like mine, and then I end up back here. He stared down at his dirty old sneakers. Colette. Maybe next time you should stop in that school and take some geography classes. She laughed at her own joke, and the kid shot her a grave look. Sandra did too. Sandra. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Hell is other people." I think he was right. Sandra crossed her arms over her chest and looked away. Colette. How did you get here, Brian? Brian. I already told you. I took 17 women between 1985 and 1992 before I was arrested. Mostly prostitutes. Then I was on death row down in Huntsville for about 14 years until I ran out of appeals. Are they going to bring us any food? They all went silent for a while and stewed in the heat of the brutal, unyielding sun. After a few minutes, Roman looked down the tracks. Roman. Man, when this train gonna come? Colonel Duval. I wouldn't be in such a rush, son. Roman. Oh yeah, why dat? Colonel Duval paused and looked at the tracks running off in the opposite direction, towards the desert, before looking back at Roman. Colonel Duval. Well, son, we don't know where that train is going to take us, do we? He paused for another moment and stared off towards the desert again. He spoke without looking back this time. He spoke quietly. Colonel Duval. Maybe this is the best part. What if it only gets worse from here? What if this is just the beginning? Roman lit another cigarette and then turned away and quietly stared in the other direction, down the tracks to the point where the rails bent off and disappeared beyond the trees. He exhaled, and the smoke drifted down the bench towards the others. They all sat there and waited for the train. Eventually, the kid took another walk and then returned a short time later, drenched in sweat. Brian remained hungry. Colette and Sandra refused to look at one another. The colonel had a solemn cast to his face. and Roman continued to reach into his endless pack of cigarettes. The temperature was 117 degrees Fahrenheit. They all just sat there in the heat, and they waited. The rain started as a whisper, soft droplets against the pavement, gentle tapping on window panes. It slid down the marble columns of the Lancaster estate, tracing thin veins of water over the stone, as if the house itself were bleeding. The air was thick with petrichor, the earthy scent of damp soil mixing with the ghostly perfume of jasmine from the overgrown trellis near the entrance. The sound of the rain was a symphony. Each drops a note in a haunting melody. Samuel Lancaster stood in the doorway, the dim light from the crystal chandelier behind him casting his long shadow across the polished floor. His hands rested at his sides, fingers twitching as if longing to close around something solid. There she was, past the wrought iron gate, the empty street, and the veil of shifting mist. The woman. She hadn't moved in over an hour. The street lamp's sickly glow barely touched her figure, making her less a person and more a presence, a smear of darkness against the silver rain, a too-still silhouette, head tilted slightly, hair damp and clinging to her face like seaweed. Her dress, though soaked through, didn't shiver in the wind. The rain should have driven her away by now, made her step back, retreat, turn. But she stood like a statue left out in the storm, untouched by the cold. Her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, seemed to hold a secret. Samuel exhaled slowly, his breath fogging in the night air. A drop of water slid from his temple to his jaw, tracing a path like a fingertip, slow and deliberate. His heartbeat drummed a quiet rhythm beneath his ribs. She was watching him. The space between them crackled with tension, like a held breath, stretched taut, waiting to snap. The wind carried the faint creak of the gate as it swayed, as if something had nudged it to open an inch. He should turn away. He should close the door, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The suspense was palpable, hanging in the air like the heavy scent of jasmine. 3 months earlier. The funeral was as it should have been, quiet, respectful, and filled with the appropriate sorrow. A sea of black-clad mourners huddled beneath a sky heavy with unshed rain, their hushed whispers blending with the wind and their murmured condolences dissolving into the damp air. The scent of fresh earth and dying flowers clung to the cemetery, a cloying mix of life and decay. Samuel stood beside Rose's parents, his posture perfectly composed, his hands cold despite the warm breeze that drifted through the headstones. The wind carried the distant chime of church bells, a sound that should have been comforting, but instead felt like a warning, hollow and stretched too thin. Rose's mother clung to him, her grip trembling, the sharp edges of her nails pressing into the sleeve of his tailored suit. The silk barely shielded him from the pressure, and he wondered absently if she realized how tightly she was holding on, as if he were the last thread tying her daughter's memory to the world. "She loved you so much, Samuel," she whispered, her voice fragile, her breath warm against his shoulder. She always talked about how lucky she was. He let his arms wrap around her, his grip firm but distant, offering comfort in the way one might comfort a stranger. His voice was smooth and practiced. "I was the lucky one." The words sat heavy on his tongue, yet weightless in his chest. After the service, his boss pulled him aside, speaking in the hushed, measured tone people reserved for grief they did not fully understand. "Take all the time you need," he said. "A loss like this, I can't imagine. We'll hold things down at the office." Samuel nodded, thanked him, and allowed himself to be led away. He had learned his role well, the grieving husband, the shattered man. But grief did not settle in his bones the way it should have. It did not wrap around his chest like a vice, and did not steal his lungs' breath. The days that followed blurred into routine. Once filled with soft laughter and the scent of jasmine tea, the house was now an echo chamber of silence. The bed felt too large, the sheets too smooth, and the bed was untouched on one side. The absence was loud in ways he had never anticipated. The refrigerator's hum at night, the absence of her toothbrush beside his, the ghost of her perfume in the closet, clinging to clothes she would never wear again. His attempts to find solace in his routine only highlighted the void left by her absence. He returned to work, slipping into meetings with robotic precision. His colleagues watched him from the corners of their eyes, their whispers thick with assumptions. His struggle to connect with others was palpable, and his isolation was a heavy shroud. Tennis became an escape, something physical, something that burned. The slam of the ball against the court, the sting of exertion in his muscles. He played too hard, his swings reckless, and the force behind each hit made the others exchange wary glances. "You okay, Sam?" One of them asked after he missed an easy return, standing frozen at the net, his grip tightening around the handle of his racket. He forced a smile. "Just tired." They didn't believe him. 3 months later, it had been exactly 3 months since Rose's funeral. It was also her birthday. The sky was the color of slate, heavy and bruised with approaching rain. The first droplets streaked against the windshield as Samuel drove home, the rhythmic hiss of the wipers cutting through the silence. The city blurred past in smears of neon and shadow, the rain distorting the world into something unreal, something shifting. Then he saw her. She stood on the sidewalk near his building, her frame half illuminated by a flickering street lamp. A woman, barefoot, half naked, her soaked dress clinging to her like a second skin. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes over her face, strands plastered against her pale cheek. Samuel's hands clenched around the wheel, fingers pressing deep into the worn leather. The rain ran down her body in thin rivulets, but something darker streaked her skin. Mud? Blood? The water pooled at her feet, carried swirls of something deep red, vanishing into the gutter. His foot hesitated on the accelerator. The headlights cast her in stark relief. The sharp planes of her face, the unnatural stillness of her posture, the way her shoulders trembled, but her gaze did not falter. It was as if time had frozen, and Samuel was trapped in this eerie moment. She was looking at him, his chest tightened, breath catching somewhere between his ribs. "Just drive past. Don't stop." He swallowed, forced his foot down, and the car lurched forward. The engine's low hum filled the space around him, but it did nothing to drown out the nagging pulse at the back of his mind. His inner turmoil was a storm raging within him, threatening to consume him. "Check the mirror." His eyes flicked upward. She hadn't moved. The rain distorted everything, turning streetlights into watery halos and reflections into shifting phantoms. But she was still there, standing in the same spot, watching. Samuel's throat felt dry, his pulse hammering too fast against his skin. He exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders, forcing himself to let go of the tension gripping his spine. A trick of the rain, an exhausted mind conjuring ghosts where none existed. He repeated this mantra, trying to convince himself, but the disbelief in his own words was palpable. He told himself that all the way home. As the storm drummed against his windows and thunder rattled the glass that night, he dreamt of her. And the next time it rained, she was there again. His colleagues noticed at work. During lunch meetings, he barely touched his food, stirring it absently, his gaze vacant as though listening to something only he could hear. His coffee sat untouched, growing cold. On the tennis court, he flinched when the first drops of rain hit the ground, his grip tightening around the racket like a lifeline. He missed easy shots. His movements were sluggish, his reaction time dull, as if something invisible weighed him down. Conversations trailed off when he entered the room. Stares lingered too long. They thought he didn't notice, but he did. The way his coworkers watched him from the corners of their eyes, whispering in hushed tones, their concern curdling into unease. One afternoon, his boss pulled him aside, his voice laced with careful hesitation. "Sam, are you all right?" There was a measured pause. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Samuel forced a laugh, a short, hollow sound that scraped against his throat. "Just haven't been sleeping well." A lie, a thin, brittle thing. No one believed him. And then, on the 7th night of rain, he saw her again. Not a faceless, blood-streaked specter. Her, Rosa. She stood beneath the street lamp, motionless, the downpour slicking her hair to her skin. Her dress, the same one from their last night together, clung to her like the tide that had swallowed her whole. Satin, deep blue, heavy with rain, darkened at the hem with something thicker than water. Samuel's breath turned to ice in his lungs. Her dark hair fell in familiar waves over her shoulders, curling like the foam of breaking waves. Her lips trembled just slightly, but her eyes, God, her eyes, were locked onto him with a weight that crushed the air from his chest. Lightning slashed across the sky. In that brief, stuttering flash of light, he saw her fully, the pallor of her skin, the sheen of water clinging to her, and the deep red staining the hem of her dress, blooming outward like ink in water. And then she screamed. The sound ripped through the night, a jagged, guttural wail that shattered something inside him. It wasn't just in his ears, inside his skull, bones, and himself. A raw, piercing shriek clawed at his mind, peeling him open and unraveling him like thread stripped from the edge of a frayed rope. Samuel collapsed, knees hitting the pavement, hands clamping over his ears. Stop! 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 But the scream didn't stop. It wouldn't stop. Because it wasn't just a scream. It was rage. It was pain. It was vengeance. It drowned him, dragged him under like the waves had dragged her. And in that suffocating abyss, a memory surfaced, sharp, inescapable. Not an accident. Not a misstep. He had killed her. The wine glass trembled in his grip. The slow swirl of the drug dissolves, invisible, into a deep red. Her laughter had softened and slurred. Her eyelids had fluttered, her body leaning into him with blind trust. How he had lifted her effortlessly over the yacht's railing. Her body had hit the water like a whisper, silent, vanishing into the dark. He had watched the bubbles rise, population vanish. He had waited, waited, waited. She never came back up. And yet now, here she was. The hospital was quiet, save for the rain tapping against the barred windows, a ceaseless rhythmic whisper against the glass. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above, casting a cold, sterile glow over the pale walls. The air smelled of antiseptic and damp linen, the scent settling heavy in Samuel's lungs like a weight he could never quite exhale. He sat hunched on the stiff mattress, hands tangled in his graying hair, his fingers pressing into his scalp as if trying to dig something out. A memory, a voice, a nightmare that refused to die. The orderlies moved past his door in shuffling patterns, their voices distant, their presence insignificant. He barely noticed them anymore. They came, they went. They pushed little white pills into his palm and watched to ensure he swallowed. It didn't matter. The pills did nothing. Nothing could stop her. A flash of lightning split the sky. Samuel turned his head toward the window, his breath already shallow, his muscles locking tight. He knew what he would see. He always did. She was there. Standing just beyond the bars, the pale, flickering light haloed her body. Her soaked dress clung to her frame, the dark, heavy fabric dripping onto the windowsill. Her bare feet hovered above the rain-slicked pavement outside, toes barely grazing the surface. They were not touching, never touching. Her hair, once soft waves that tumbled over her shoulders, now hung in tangled ropes, strands sticking to the sunken hollows of her face. Her skin, pallid and waterlogged, stretched too tight over her cheekbones. Her lips, blue, trembling, parted slightly, but no breath escaped. Her appearance was a grotesque mockery of the woman he once knew. She stared. Samuel's pulse thudded against his ribs. His stomach turned, but he couldn't move. He never could. Her arm rose, slow and deliberate, droplets sliding from her fingertips. A single shaking finger extended, pointing directly at him. Accusing, unrelenting. Then, the scream. The room shattered with sound. Not just a noise, not just a voice, a force. A jagged, piercing wail rattled the glass, made the walls tremble and tore through him. Samuel clamped his hands over his ears, but it was useless. The scream wasn't just in the air. It was inside him. It flooded his veins and scraped at the marrow of his bones. It filled every corner of the room and every cell of his body, vibrating, suffocating, and drowning. He slammed himself against the wall, gasping, clawing at his arms, trying to rip something out, something buried beneath his skin. His own sobs broke through, raw and animalistic, but the scream only grew louder, pressing against his skull like a storm waiting to burst. His futile escape attempts only served to highlight his desperation. No one came to help him. No one ever did. The hospital's silence, the absence of any comforting presence, only deepened his isolation. The rain poured outside, heavy, relentless, a drumbeat to his unraveling. She did not leave. She never would. She never would. Summer 1992. 7th cup. The tea still works, even though it shifts and alters more than it should. My skin is tighter. I feel it around my chin and my collarbones, but it takes curious forms here and there, either too smooth or too sharp. The first time it happened, I barely noticed. I was blinded by relief, youth. I don't recognize my own reflection anymore. Now my patience wears thin where it once stretched long. My thoughts move too quickly, and my moods shift without warning. The hours of morning I used to cherish agitate me. It's like I'm trapped in time, not freed from it. Next time I'll use more leaves, just to make sure. The walls were covered with vines that followed the delicate pattern of bricks, seeping through gaps in the mortar and peeking inside like intruders. The house stood like a forgotten relic, with its green tapestry of tendrils creeping along the windowsills, curling around the hinges and swaying gently in the breeze. Some vines had grown so thick they formed a canopy over the sagging porch, casting shifting shadows on the creaking wooden floors. On the side, the chimney peeked out from the greenery, barely visible beneath the stubborn embrace of ivy. It was a house where nature had reclaimed its place, where the edges of time were blurred and cloudy. At the start of spring, the lilies flowered, and through the door, left ajar, you could see a bouquet placed carefully on the table. If you turned right, through the air that carried the earthy scents of the vines, you would find yourself in the parlor, where furniture sat like forgotten ghosts of another era. An armchair draped with quilt, a table so old its scratches looked like wrinkles, books with cracked spines and yellowed pages scattered across a shelf leaning slightly to one side. Moss clung to the edges of the fireplace. From here, you'd go through one of the two doors and end up in either the bedroom or the kitchen. The bed, centered in the middle of the room, had chipped paint coming off its iron frame. The blend of abandonment and charm that was the kitchen had mismatched jars of spices and dried herbs lined on shelves, and next to the sink, a cast iron kettle that rested on a stove, pulsing with a strange vitality. Its lid always seemed to breathe with soft metallic sighs, an ancient creature that seemed to know every secret whispered within the house. This altered slice of forest belonged entirely to Dorothy, an old lady whose only company was the house itself. Dorothy had lived there for as long as anyone could remember, a quiet but constant presence on the edge of the world. Her wiry frame, draped in shawls, moved slowly through the vine-covered walls, her hands always stained with the green of crushed herbs or brewed teas. Depending on who told the story, she might have been a herbalist, a healer, or even a witch. But for those who didn't like to indulge in the grasps of fiction, she was just a lonely old woman. The solace she found in nature helped her cope with the sadness and grief brought by age. Her thoughts often spiraled into the past, replaying moments from her youth that were long gone. The forest became her refuge, a place where her grief felt less sharp, where she could lose herself in the rustling of leaves overhead. It made her feel small in the most comforting sense, like a child again, cradled by something much larger than herself. Each time she was surrounded by the vibrant green and the hum of insects, she felt life and youth pumping through her veins. It made something inside her ache, deep and primal. It was as if she wanted to consume the forest whole, swallow its wildness and vitality, and fill the hollow place within her that grief had carved. In this warm embrace, she could almost forget all the heaviness she carried. Almost. April 23rd, 1952. First cup. I don't know what to expect. Perhaps a little more energy, an ease in my joints. I can see the plant standing outside my window, unfazed, as if it didn't just surrender something so life-changing to me. I don't expect miracles, because that would be foolish. If I wake up tomorrow and feel the way I did 10 years ago, even 5. Dorothy was at that age when even the slightest noise troubled her sleep. So when she heard the soft, almost rhythmic rustling, she got up immediately. It wasn't the sharp sound of wind, nor the familiar clattering of branches or leaves carried on the breeze. She stretched, her eyes still heavy with sleep, and gazed out through a gap in the curtains. There, growing just outside the window, was a plant nestled against the weathered stone wall, claiming the place as if it had always belonged. Except it didn't, the old woman thought. Its presence felt almost magical, with white blossoms that stood out like tiny stars, delicate and almost too perfect. Dorothy got her shawl and went outside to get a better look. The closer she stepped, the quicker her heart beat. She knelt down, her fingers brushing the leaves lightly. The plant had a quiet elegance and an earthy scent so familiar, she almost didn't notice the subtle, sweet fragrance that lingered in the breeze. The plant seemed to hum with life beneath her touch, It called to her. Was it a gift? An omen? As Dorothy pulled her hand away from the plant, she felt an odd, sudden shift. Something within her had been gently untangled. She looked down at her palm, and, instead of the familiar creases that had accumulated over the years, she saw skin so smooth, almost unmarked, as if just that part of her body had slipped away in time. The wrinkles, the evidence of age that had clung to her like a malady for so long, had vanished, replaced by the soft texture that she hadn't known in decades. In the stillness of night, Dorothy couldn't help but wonder, had the plant done more than just grow? Had it reached into her and drawn something out, something almost rotten? And if yes, could it do it again? A strange surge of impulse swept over her. She reached toward one of its thick, twisting branches, curled her fingers around it, and, with a sudden determination and strength, snapped it off. The leaves rustled in protest, but the plant itself made no other sound, no objection, no struggle. Start off by boiling the water, 4 cups over medium-high heat, which you then pour over about 1 tablespoon of leaves and steep to the desired strength before straining. The quantity of leaves influences the end result. Taste, smell, years turned back, so beware. Add sugar, if needed, and stir until completely dissolved. Pour into a cup and drink. She set the teapot on the table and rested her hands on the worn surface. The silence in the room seemed to stretch, as though the whole house was holding its breath. When she poured the hot liquid into her cup, the smell was sweet and inviting. Before lifting the cup to her lips, she let her gaze drift back to the smooth skin of her palm. It seemed impossible, and for a second, she thought it might all be a dream, a mirage created by her sleeping self. But there it was again, the freshness of youth staring back at her, all too real. As she took her first slow sip, the light of dawn crept through the curtains, casting a pale, golden glow across the room. A ray of sunlight slipped past the table, past the jars with their faded labels covered in a layer of dust, and kissed the edge of the cup. After downing its contents, Dorothy couldn't help but smile. Years passed. The world shifted and reshaped itself. Time had forgiven nobody. It shed its old skin and kept emerging in a new form, always moving forward. Seasons marked their passing in the slow dance between life, death, and rebirth. The forest stirred from its slumber each spring, deepened its song in summer, caught its breath in autumn, and went to sleep at last, in winter. Outside Dorothy's house, the plant stood tall, its leaves shimmering in the sunlight, vibrant and green. It didn't wither in the cold or droop in the heat, and while the trees around it shed their leaves, the plant turned a deeper shade of green, as if to mock the cycle of decay that governed everything else. Something so human, so terrestrial, this idea of age, was never a threat to its well-being. Dorothy had witnessed these changes through both joy and sorrow. She was always there, a still point in a spinning universe. Each time she plucked a fresh leaf, she felt a rush of vitality fill her, the years peeling away from her skin. Her reflection showed a face far younger than she had any right to possess. 1 cup, 2 cups, 3, 20, 100. It was easy to lose track of time. The cycle of day and night became meaningless. Days and hours and minutes were nothing compared to the eternity locked behind her eyes. Instead, Dorothy would measure the passing of time by watching the plant diminish before her eyes, wondering how long it had left before turning into withered twigs. Would it one day simply stop growing altogether? Would she steal its essence until they both shrank? one no longer thriving at the other's expense. 132nd cup. I used to think highly of the plant, how time doesn't affect its leaves or flowers, but I'm not so sure anymore. The tea makes my stomach turn. I drink it anyway. What's the alternative? But every sip feels like a chore. I miss the sweet taste it once had. I don't even want to think about the possibility of it dying. Maybe it already is, and I just don't let myself see. The earth beneath Dorothy's feet was dry and cracked, reflecting nothing but decay. Around her, the world was lifeless. Even the birds, creatures that had once filled the mornings with their song, had long since vanished. Only silence remained. At the center of this desolation stood the plant, at least what was left of it. Its branches were brittle and twisted, no longer covered by the lush leaves that had once crowned it in green splendor. Dorothy knelt before it one last time, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch the withered frame. She could feel it, the final breath of life, and she knew in the ache of her bones, in the faint lines that had begun to reappear on her hands yet again, that this would be all over at last. Time, it seemed, had finally caught up to her, and yet she couldn't resist taking this one more gift. Carefully, she plucked the final few leaves from the plant's skeletal frame, thin and fragile like paper soaked in water. In the kitchen, she lit the fire and set the battered kettle on the stove. The water boiled slowly, keeping the moment alive for just a while longer, this last ritual that she was unwilling to let go of. She dropped the leaves into the cup, watching as they unfurled, filling the air with the earthy scent tinged with a faint bitterness she couldn't recall. It smelled of death. She carried the cup back to the garden, standing among the ruins of her once vibrant wood, the plant motionless behind her. She hesitated for a moment before raising the cup to her lips and drinking slowly. The warmth spread through her body, but the feeling was different this time. Heavier, less vibrant. Her hands did not change. The lines on her face remained. The tea had nothing left to give. Behind her, the plant made a soft, cracking sound, and when she turned, she saw it collapse in on itself. Its branches curled inward. Its roots shrank, pulling away from the earth until there was nothing left but a blackened patch of soil. It was gone, completely gone. As Dorothy stood in the silent, dead garden, she felt a strange sensation stir within her chest, faint at first, and then growing stronger, deeper, spreading through her body like the vines on the house. When she clutched her arms, panic rising in her throat, she felt her skin softening, thinning, veins emerging beneath the surface like the ridges of a leaf. Her legs trembled, and she fell to her knees, the cracked earth beneath pressing into her bones. She couldn't rise back up no matter how hard she tried. She was shrinking, folding into herself, rooting into the soil as if she was being claimed by it. Swallowed. Her hair began to tangle and grow wild, sprouting into long, twisting vines that cascaded down her back and over her shoulders. She wanted to scream, but her words cut off, muffled by the sound of creaking wood emerging from her throat. It was as though the forest was taking back the very life she had drained from the plant over centuries. She had stolen, and now she would give. That was her last thought before her human form erased itself completely. Dorothy stands now, elegant and tall, her branches twisted upward toward the pale sky. She gave up on trying to regain her human beauty, but she mourns it still, while her leaves are swaying gently in the wind. From a distance, she appears flawless, a vibrant plant in contrast to the barren garden. As you get closer, though, you start to notice the rot and ruin on the tips of her leaves, how they curl inwards as if, in their attempt to grow, they lost their strength halfway. They whisper of a decay she cannot escape, no matter how deeply her roots have sunk into the soil. Well, beyond the fence. I'm gonna take a freight train, down at the station, Lord. I don't care where it goes. Gonna climb a mountain, the highest mountain. I'll jump off, nobody gonna know. The Marshall Tucker Band. I'm so angry. I did my best. I really did. That road from the army base where we live now, running out west towards that looted Costo outlet near Corvallis, is littered with abandoned cars and trucks, all rusting out, tires flat, gas tank lids and caps open. I know all the places where you have to go off-road to get around them, but there are always things you just can't predict. The law of unintended consequences, they call it. That's what happened to me, I guess. I became an unintended consequence. I don't know. Maybe that's not right. I'm not thinking very clearly right now. Molly, too, my Staffordshire Terrier. She was an unintended consequence as well, maybe. I guess. I felt worse about her in the end, honestly. I loved Molly so much. Those little fuckers. I hate them so much, and now I am them. The old Toyota 4Runner was running pretty smooth despite the degraded quality of the fuel that was left to us, and it only bogged down on me a few times during the drive, but never stalled out. When I reached the parking lot, I came to a stop by the loading docks, like always. I grabbed the cut-down Remington 12-gauge and stuffed the box of pumpkin balls into my jacket pocket. Normally, I would have left the driver's side door open, but I had to keep Molly inside. I certainly wasn't bringing her in there. The rear door to the Costco was still propped open, just like it always is, and I found the battered old orange hand truck sitting right there in the corner, just like it always is. Things looked much as they always did. I couldn't hear anything, but I still kept the shotgun pointed directly ahead of me as I entered the store floor from the back room. I clicked on the small flashlight mounted to the barrel with some electrical tape and squinted into the darkness. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I entered. I left the hand truck right there and proceeded very slowly. It was my turn to do this today, and I never argued against it when my turn came. But Kaylee was my only remaining child, and I had to get back to her. I was in no big rush. I simply had to do my job and get back. I'm just so angry now. I really messed this up. I took a can of baked beans off the closest shelf and threw it as far as I could down one of the aisles, and then I shuffled back a few steps to see what would happen, listening for the sound of footsteps, ready to run if there were too many. I heard nothing. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I moved forward. A short time later, I had the first load of supplies stacked up on the hand truck. I left it there and checked the back room again with the flashlight beam on my shotgun, and then checked the back parking lot for a moment just to make sure everything was cool out there too. Seeing nothing of concern, I hauled the first load of supplies out and loaded them into the back of the 4Runner as quietly as possible. When I returned, I took all of the same precautions. I made no assumptions, but again, everything seemed clear, so I went ahead and gathered up the rest of the supplies. In the end, I had canned foods, batteries, bottled water and juice, toilet paper, napkins, Tylenol, garbage bags, t-shirts, vitamins, and a few other things. There wasn't very much left at that Costco by that point, but we didn't go much further into the more previously populated urban areas until it became truly necessary. Again, I checked the back room and the parking lot before I hauled the hand truck out through the loading dock door and placed everything in the back of the old Toyota SUV as quietly as possible. Then I heard the sound of something being knocked over, coming through the rear door of the Costco outlet. It sounded metallic, maybe a bucket or a garbage pail being tipped over, or something like that. I pointed my shotgun in that direction for a second, and then jumped into the driver's seat of the Toyota and drove off. I had what I came for, and Molly was barking like crazy. It would take at least 5 or 6 hours, maybe more, to get back to the base, and I had already traveled at least that same amount of time, just getting there earlier that day. I would definitely have to refuel from the tanks in the back soon. I was ready to push on through, but when it started raining, I knew it would take much longer, and it would be much more dangerous. I had to rethink my plans. I knew a place. It was more important that I just got back to Kaylee than getting back right away. I knew she would be scared if I didn't return that night, but that's obviously better than not returning at all. My sister Amy would comfort her as much as possible. I wasn't looking forward to my night either, but Amy would take care of her until I got there with the supplies. Like I said, I knew a place. It was just past a highway exit sign for Langhorne Avenue. That sign has a red letter X spray painted across it. Everyone knows what that means. Just past that exit, along the side of the road just before you reach Redmond, there is a little sleep spot we sometimes use when we have to. It is proven safe. It used to be a small electrical substation, just a little 8x12 steel structure, about 10 feet tall, that once housed some power transmission equipment. At some point, someone gutted it out, and you can still see the old components rusting there, just outside of the door, the tall grass growing up through the cracks. I pulled the Toyota around in front of that old substation, but I kept the engine running, and I stayed inside for a little while, and used my binoculars to search the surrounding area for signs of movement. The sky was gray and the sun was setting, but I saw nothing of concern. So eventually I grabbed the shotgun and my travel bag and got out of the SUV as cautiously and quietly as possible. I left the driver's side door open, despite the light rain. I didn't want to make any unnecessary noise, and if I needed to make a quick escape, that could make the difference. Once Molly and I were inside that old substation, I quickly closed the door behind me and dropped the zip-tie bundled rebar bolts into place. Then I stood there by the door for a while, holding my shotgun, but I didn't hear anything outside, and eventually I relaxed a bit. They don't like the rain, but you never really know. The filthy old mattress was a welcome sight. I sat there as I ate a cold can of Chef Boyardee raviolis. They were so delicious, and I took my time. It was a treat. I had dog food and water for Molly, too. She was happy as well. Afterwards, I laid my sleeping bag out on the mattress, and Molly and I fell asleep to the fading sound of rain pattering off the steel roof. It was nice. A few hours later, I was awoken by the sound of Molly's growling and barking. She was standing by the door, and I could hear the sounds of screaming and scratching coming from the other side. I grabbed my shotgun and pulled Molly back, breathing heavily, hoping the door would hold. I checked the rebar bolts. The door seemed solid. After a while, the rain picked up. The violent sounds coming from outside faded away, and then I set the shotgun down and returned to the bed. It was hard to find sleep again. I stared up into the darkness for a while. It was just over 3 years ago when it all began. A facility in the woods of northern Montana where they housed and performed tests on children who had been exposed to experimental biochemical weapons in various locations around the world. Things were fine there until they were not. The confused and sometimes conflicting news reports at the time mostly said that there was an antivirus that was administered to those kids on a daily basis. But one day the supplies ran out. Then, by the next morning, That facility was overrun. Blood and gore. The fences went down. But what no one knew until then was that it was contagious. Most people past the age of adolescence quickly succumb to it, but not everyone. No one really knows why. It all happened very quickly. And then it was all over, and I mean all of it. Everything. The world is very different now. This part of the world, anyway. I really don't know what it's like elsewhere. We don't receive news reports anymore. I eventually fell asleep and woke up a few hours later with Molly cuddled up by my side. I fed her some kibble for breakfast, and then I ate a granola bar and drank a bottle of water and packed up my gear. I looked out through the 2 small peepholes before leaving the safety of the substation with Molly by my side. The rain had stopped, but it was still gray and cloudy. I guess I made a little too much noise unbolting and opening the door. As soon as we stepped outside, I heard the clattering from behind the substation and on the low rooftop overhead. We must have just waited out there all night. I didn't know they were capable of that. I thought they just retreated back into the woods once they quit the hunt. Molly paid the price, not me. I hate myself for that. I hate myself. When they pounced, I fired my shotgun twice and blasted 2 of them in the chest and put them down. Both teenage boys, stark naked and filthy, with elongated nails and teeth, long straggly hair, moving with predatory speed. Unfortunately, there were 3 more who fell on Molly, 2 adults and a kid. I was about to take another shot, but they were all over her, and trust me, she was fighting back like a fucking monster. But I just saw no way to not hit her as well. After a few seconds, I realized she would soon be dead anyway, so I just unloaded my remaining 4 shells and killed them all, including Molly. I was so angry, but I started crying right away. I'm still enraged. They made me kill Molly, those little fuckers. As I was making my way to the driver's side door of the Toyota with my head down and staring at the grass through my tear-blurred vision, that's when the last one got me. He was just a little kid, maybe 10 years old. Perhaps that's why he held back when the others rushed in. I don't know. Who can say? Who knows how they think? I guess I will know soon enough. It's already starting. He came around from the back of the lift gate and dove at me and bit me on my forearm. There was only the one quick bite before I turned around and smashed him in the forehead with the butt of my Remington. But as soon as I got into the forerunner and closed the door, I could see that he had drawn blood. I wiped it off with my bandana and poured some rubbing alcohol on it. I was scared, but I still had some hope. I had my fingers crossed, but I still had some hope. That hope faded quickly along the drive back to the base. I feel sick now. I feel very sick, and it's just getting worse. My head is starting to pound, and I feel like I might need to vomit. My teeth and gums and my fingernails and toenails are all starting to ache. My vision is changing, and my throat is dry. I'm starting to make some involuntary growling sounds, and I cannot stop gripping the steering wheel with all of the strength in my hands. I want to just get out of the Toyota and run. It doesn't even matter where. I was planning to just drop off these supplies by the front gates of the base and then leave. But it's still at least a 2-hour drive, and I am afraid of who or what I will be by the time I get there. I think I have to just turn around right now and drive in the opposite direction for as long as I possibly can. I have reloaded the Remington, and I am keeping it handy. I am sweating and drooling pretty hard now. I can't help it. My clothes are also starting to feel extremely uncomfortable. I think I might need to pull over and remove my shirt and boots soon. Maybe my jeans too. I don't think I can take this too much longer. I keep looking at the woods along the side of the road. I just want to run off into the trees. I want to scream. I want to eat something while it is still breathing. Mostly, I just want to end this before it gets worse. I know that I will never see Kaylee again, and even more than what happened to Molly, that's what makes me feel so sick. I'm sure my sister Amy will take good care of her, but still, I just feel so sick. I keep looking at the woods and at the Remington. I just have to keep driving for a little bit longer now. The radio stations all went dark years ago, and there's only one stupid old CD stuck inside the dashboard stereo in this Toyota for me to listen to as I drive, the Marshall Tucker Band. So I turn it up. What else am I going to do? The hum of the motor is hurting my head, and the lyrics seem right. I'm gonna find me a hole in the wall. I'm gonna crawl inside and die. But no, I don't think so. That would be too easy. I think I'm gonna die with my boots on. And I'm definitely gonna bring some of you little bastards with me. Get ready to eat some of these 12-gauge pumpkin balls. It's not going to be pretty. I'm gonna cut some of you little demons in half while I still can. As many of you as possible, until my ammo runs out. I owe that much to Kaylee and Molly and Amy and all of the others. I see a red letter X spray painted on the exit sign up ahead. I'll be there soon. You'll know when I arrive, you little fuckers. Trust me, you'll know. The next step. Tristan stirred the sickly green tea in his mug, watching the bag bob up and down in murky suspension. He took a sip, cringed, and grunted in disgust. Far from being satisfying, he thought it tasted like wet grass and regret. He sighed and left the break room, entering the office corridor and pressing the elevator button with the same tired resignation he'd applied to his third cup that morning. The mirrored elevator doors reflected a man worn thin, tired eyes, and a mouth set in a permanent downturn. He tried not to look at the strands of premature gray creeping over his ears. He took another sip of his matcha, forcing himself to swallow, trying not to think of how closely the drink resembled something he once scraped off the wheels of his lawnmower. Sighing heavily, Tristan glanced at his watch. He'd had back-to-back meetings all morning and hadn't felt needed for any of them, having so far only sat silently, taking notes and nodding as higher-ups talked in circles for an hour, while ultimately saying nothing. Just a few more years, he reminded himself for the millionth time. A few more years proving yourself, then you'll be promoted to manager, then director, then you'll have made it. He took another sip of matcha and grimaced, struggling between forcing himself to swallow or spitting it out. It was a few moments before he noticed the old man who had come to stand beside him, waiting for the elevator. The old man looked sideways at Tristan and grinned. Just switched to tea, eh? Tristan forced himself to finally swallow and nodded. Yeah. The old man chuckled and said, "That look on your face, oof! You're a coffee guy, am I right?" Tristan examined the old man's face. He was ancient, likely pushing 90, but he wasn't a senior executive or even on the board. Tristan had memorized all their faces, not really in the mood to make small talk with some random old guy. Tristan just nodded. "Thought so," the old man continued conversationally. "Let me guess, it wasn't your idea." Tristan frowned down at the tea in his hand and said, "My girlfriend suggested it." "Ah, another young pup, just doing as he's told." The old man chuckled again. "It's a shame you don't know how to think for yourself." Tristan bristled slightly at the remark, but didn't want to cause a scene at work by telling this guy off. So he forced himself to remain silent by drinking more matcha. The old man looked sideways at him and shook his head in disappointment. "Nothing?" "Pity. I hoped you had more spine than that. Tristan turned to face the man, his brows pressing together as he clenched a fist. "What's your problem?" Tristan demanded angrily. The old man laughed. "That's more like it. I knew there was still someone alive in there." The old man poked Tristan in the chest and laughed again. Tristan sneered and turned back to the elevator, wondering just what the hell was taking the damn thing so long. "You'll be waiting a long time if you just stand here," the old man said. "Feel free to take the stairs," Tristan snapped. "I don't mean the elevator, kid," the old man said, suddenly serious. "Your goals, your dreams. I assume you have some. Let me tell you, no one ever got anywhere by just waiting. You gotta find it yourself." "Yeah, well, no one's told me where else to look yet, so," Tristan replied coldly. "And you're just waiting to be told, eh? Want the world to just hand you everything you want? That's the problem with you kids. You think your dreams just come true on their own?" Tristan exhaled sharply, having had enough of being lectured by a stranger of no importance. He opened his mouth, ready to tell the old guy exactly what he thought. Then something was pressed into his chest. A folded sheet of paper, bronzed by time. "Lucky for you, kid," the old man whispered conspiratorially. "That's exactly how your world works today." What is this?" Tristan asked suspiciously, his anger suddenly replaced with confusion. He carefully peeled back a corner of the folded paper. It looked like trash to him. He wondered if the old man was simply crazy. "That, young blood, is a map," the old man said, pointing at the paper. "A map to a priceless reward. I can tell by looking at you that you're not where you want to be in life. You follow that map, and your life will be forever changed." "This is a joke, right?" Tristan asked. "You're giving me a treasure map? What is this, Uncharted?" "It's okay, young blood," the old man grinned. "I didn't believe it first either, when a stranger handed me that thing. It took me 37 years to take it seriously. Wasted a lot of time. But if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have hesitated for a second." The intense sincerity with which the man spoke made Tristan uneasy, but at the same time he had felt a rush of excitement course through him. Even if the man was crazy, this was the most interesting thing that had ever happened to him, so why not play along? "Okay then," Tristan began, slowly unfolding the supposed map, deciding to humor the man for now. "What's this reward? And why didn't you take it yourself?" "No, boy, I did take it," the old man insisted. "Everyone gets their own reward. That map you're holding will guide you to a place that exists on no other map. From there, it will show you the way through the maze." "Maze?" Tristan repeated, still not sure if he should be taking this seriously or not. "Yes, or a labyrinth more like. The map will lead you to the center, where you can claim your personal reward. But there's a condition to claim it. You have to pay it forward." Tristan stared down at the map in his hands. It was so fragile, worn thin, and creased with countless folds. It felt like it was going to crumble to dust in his hands. The old man turned and began walking away, just as the elevator dinged to announce its arrival. "What you do next is up to you, but take some free advice. Don't waste half your life wondering about it." Over the following days, Tristan kept telling himself the old man was crazy. A treasure map? Ridiculous. But a part of him was intrigued, even more so when he asked around the office for the old man, and no one seemed to have ever seen him. He couldn't really explain why he decided to listen to the old man in the end, but Tristan left his home and began his search. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He took all the vacation days he had, then took off. After weeks of travel, All doubts about the map vanished as he found the place it led to. Tristan stood in a forgotten valley as the sun began to fall behind the horizon, looking in awe at the towering dark walls before him. They stretched infinitely to the left and right of where he stood, fading into the dwindling light in the distance and even stretching into the darkening sky. An archway towered over Tristan, a gaping mouth that marked the entrance to this place. Tristan almost expected lightning to split the sky. How could this monolith go undiscovered? Who had built it and why? These questions and countless more swirled around Tristan's mind like a hurricane, but they didn't matter. Not when he was this close. He had doubted that this whole adventure would lead to anything, but there was no denying it now. Tristan turned the map over in his hands, searching the back and the corners for what to do next. But there was nothing. The old man had told him the map would also guide him to the center of the labyrinth, but Tristan saw nothing that would help him the rest of the way. "Find me!" a voice suddenly whispered in the wind. Tristan jumped so much he nearly tore the map in half. He turned on the spot and searched for whoever had spoken, but he was in an empty field. There wasn't another person in sight. "Find me!" the voice whispered again, more urgently this time. Tristan turned again as he realized where the voice was coming from. It was speaking from within the labyrinth, a voice born on the wind that breathed out of the labyrinth's depths. Swallowing his nerves, Tristan took a hesitant step into the labyrinth. The world exhaled. Everything fell silent. Glancing over his shoulder, Tristan's face paled in an instant. The massive archway he had just stepped through had vanished. Instead, he was staring at a section of wall made of flat, dark stones that towered overhead, disappearing into the sky. Tristan stumbled forward and pressed his hand against the wall, pressing hard and breathing fast. "No, no, no, no," Tristan muttered in a panic as he felt all around the wall, looking for a way to get back out, but to no avail. After a few minutes of fruitless efforts, Tristan sat down in the dirt with his back against the wall, wondering what he should do now. He took several slow, deep breaths and managed to ease his sense of panic. As he calmed down, he began to examine the area around him. There were 3 paths, leading left, right, and directly ahead of him. Each one stretched into shadows. Tristan looked down at the useless map in his hands. To his shock, the map had changed. The instructions that had been there, that had led him to the labyrinth's entrance, had gone. Now there was a detailed drawing of the labyrinth itself. As Tristan watched, he saw that the illustration was still growing, the black lines spreading as though sketched by numerous invisible hands. As Tristan watched in awe, the black ink filled the page until the full labyrinth was drawn out, an intricate spider's web with a large, empty square at its center. "Find me," the voice whispered once more. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Tristan swallowed hard as he tried to wrap his head around what was happening, then nodded once as if he just convinced himself to continue. The map clearly marked the center of the labyrinth, and Tristan noticed tiny dots following the path to his left. Without another moment of hesitation, Tristan turned and followed the directions, moving quickly, but cautiously, into the hidden depths. As Tristan followed the map's instructions, he heard the grinding of stones frequently, and could swear that whenever he looked at the map, it had changed slightly. There was no way of knowing what the other halls contained, but he could hear things lurking in darkness, stomping and slithering out of sight. He was certain they could hear him too, maybe even smell him. He didn't want to think about what would happen if he wandered down the wrong path. There came a point After hours of wandering, where Tristan's path split into two corridors, the map clearly told him to go right, but Tristan felt a strong pull to go left instead. He had no idea what was down that path. He had no reason to veer off the safe route and pursue whatever was down that way, but the desire was almost overwhelming. He took a single step to the left, staring wistfully into the darkness. There's something incredible down there, he thought. Whatever strange force was calling to him felt as familiar as going home after a long time away. It called to him, not in words, but in a way he could feel, like a thought he didn't remember having, a memory he'd never lived. But it was as dark as any other path, and utterly, deathly, silent. Despite this, Tristan could almost swear the air felt warmer down that path. Tristan took another step forward, dreaming of what wonders might be that way. "Find me," the voice whispered again, louder. Tristan snapped out of his dreamlike state. He turned and hurried along the path the map told him to go, already forgetting about the alluring alternative route that had called to him. Tristan lost track of how long he had been walking, though it felt like days. He rounded another bend and saw the infinitely large hall widen, revealing a bright silver light. Tristan gasped slightly as he realized this was the center of the labyrinth. He'd made it. Stumbling forward, Tristan fell to his knees on the grass before a raised platform that marked the center of the maze. Wiping the sweat from his eyes, Tristan glanced around, taking in his unremarkable surroundings. The only thing in the courtyard to see was the platform in front of him and the tall, shining object standing atop it. The light seemed to emanate from the object itself. It had an ornate frame made of silver, which twinkled enticingly. The frame held a simple, full-length mirror. Tristan stared up at the mirror with growing confusion. Was this it? This was the prize? "Find me," the voice whispered again suddenly, this time with much more insistence. Tristan flinched at the sound, as it was louder than ever before, and it sounded as if it came from the mirror. This time, now he was so close, Tristan recognized the voice. It was his own, speaking out of the mirror with urgency. The hairs on his arms and the back of his neck stood on end as Tristan stared with wide eyes at the mirror. The surface seemed to shimmer like a small pond, reflecting the light of a full moon. Tristan slowly moved closer, unblinking as he climbed onto the stone platform and stepped in front of the mirror. When he looked at his reflection, Tristan gasped. Where his reflection should have been, there was instead a strange yet familiar face. The old man from the office, who had encouraged Tristan on this adventure, stood in the mirror, looking out at Tristan with a hard and hungry gaze. "Hey, young blood, you found me," the old man said with a grin. He spoke with Tristan's voice. "What? How?" Tristan stammered. What's happening?" Tristan suddenly felt an ice-cold sensation grip his chest. He gasped from the shock of it and clutched a hand to his heart as he stumbled, almost falling to his knees. Glancing up, he saw the old man in the mirror begin to change. His white hair began to fill with color, becoming light brown and thick. The wrinkles on his face began to fade, and his skin became smooth. Tristan looked down at his hands, and his breath caught in his throat. His skin was shriveling before his eyes, the color draining fast, his fingers curling like brittle twigs. His veins pressed against thin and papery skin, his hands weak and trembling. "Help!" Tristan croaked, looking up at the old man in the mirror. But the old man didn't look old anymore. As Tristan stared, finally falling to his knees as his legs suddenly became too frail, he saw that the old man had become more youthful in only moments, becoming decades younger. What truly horrified Tristan, though, was the old man's new youthful face. It was his own. Tristan reached up and touched his face with trembling fingers. He felt his cheeks had hollowed out, and the skin around his neck and jawline seemed to hang loose from his bones. "Sorry, young blood," the man in the mirror said with Tristan's voice, now wearing Tristan's face. "You should have looked for yourself. The road not taken. Am I right?" Tristan felt a sudden invisible force begin to pull him towards the mirror. He screamed and clawed at the stone platform beneath him, trying desperately to find something to grab hold of. Tristan felt himself being dragged towards the mirror, and he screamed even louder, his eyes bulging out of his suddenly ancient face. He tried to crawl away, but the invisible force was too strong, and his now aged body too weak. Looking back, Tristan stared in horror as his feet touched the mirror, but instead of hitting glass, they simply vanished inside, as if he had sunk his feet into a dark ocean. Screaming even louder, Tristan thrashed and tried to pull himself free. He desperately tried to grab hold of something. He dug his fingers into any crack in the stones he could find. His fingernails snapped off as he was dragged with irresistible force, leaving thin trails of blood on the stone as he continued to claw for help. The man in the mirror, who now looked exactly like Tristan had, watched as Tristan slowly sank into the mirror. Tristan screamed the whole while, thrashing and clawing at the ground as first he sank into the mirror up to his knees, then his waist. Tristan still screamed and flailed when he was in up to his chest. Finally, the screaming stopped as Tristan's head vanished into the mirror, though one hand still protruded through the mirror, bloody and frail, searching wildly for something to grab onto, until even that had gone. Once the labyrinth's courtyard was silent once more, the man who had taken Tristan's visage pressed his hands on his side of the mirror and pushed, emerging easily from the mirror and stepping out into the cool air. He turned around and looked back into the mirror, admiring his reflection. With a smirk, the man smoothed out his new hair. He then looked down at the ground and saw the ancient map. With a grin, the man reached down and picked it up and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Then he turned and walked away, whistling casually as he vanished into the darkness. Discarded skins. I remember finding the first one in my closet. I was grabbing a shirt, already late for work, when my hand brushed against it. Warm, rubbery, and yielding in a way that made my stomach churn. I yanked my hand back and stared at the thing draped across the hangers, a limp, hollow version of me, sagging, the husk of discarded scrap. Its face, my face, stared back, lips parted in a silent plea. The eyes were in empty, gelatinous voids. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. What the hell? My first thought was a prank. Maybe someone had broken in, made a grotesque model of me, and left it here. But no one had keys except me, and the precision was unnerving. The scar on my chin from a childhood fall, the crescent moon birthmark under my collarbone. It was all there, rendered in grotesque detail. I grabbed it by the shoulder and shook it loose. The whole thing collapsed into a heap on the floor, as weightless as air but uncomfortably warm to the touch. The closet smelled faintly of salt and decay. I shoved it into a trash bag and tossed it in the dumpster before driving to work. The image of its slack jaw burned into my memory. By noon, I'd convinced myself it was some sort of vivid hallucination brought on by stress. Too much caffeine, too little sleep. But then another appeared. This one turned up under my bed. I was searching for my phone charger, and there it was, sprawled in the shadows as if it had been waiting. The hollow replica of myself, limp and sagging, carried a new, unsettling alteration. The left hand was missing 2 fingers. When I examined my own hand, my stomach lurched. My pinky and ring finger felt cold, numb, almost alien. I spent the rest of the night awake, pacing. The discarded skins weren't hallucinations. By the end of the week, I'd found 4 more. One in the passenger seat of my car, another hanging from the shower rod, dripping as if freshly peeled. Each time, they became less complete. The one on the couch had a gaping hole where the stomach should have been. The one in the garage? Its legs ended in frayed, uneven stumps. The air around them carried a faint static charge, buzzing against my skin. Each discovery left me more hollow, more off. My reflection in the mirror didn't feel right anymore. My movements lagged, mimicking a glitching video feed. And then there was the itching, deep beneath the skin, under muscles, along my spine. At night, I lay rigid in bed, clutching the sheets as my body writhed with an electric discomfort I couldn't scratch away. It came to a head when I decided to burn one. The 5th skin had appeared in my kitchen, slumped in front of the fridge as though it had crawled there to die. I dragged it into the backyard, my hands shaking, the trash bag hissing against the grass. The lighter fluid splashed across its surface, glistening with an oily sheen. I lit a match, my breath hitching as the flame licked the edge. The smell hit me first, a sharp, acrid reek that turned my stomach. Then came the pain. It began in my fingers and tore through my nerves, jagged and relentless as barbed wire. I dropped the match and crumpled to my knees, screaming. A creeping pressure surged beneath my skin, straining it to the point of tearing. The fire hissed and died, the skin untouched. My hands trembled as I ran my fingers along my own arm, and that's when I felt it. A seam, almost invisible, running along my wrist. I tugged at it instinctively, and a sliver of my own skin peeled back. Beneath it, I saw something. Not muscle, not bone. A gleaming dark mass, rippling with a life of its own. By morning, the itching became a torment. My flesh crawled with a million tiny, unseen legs, gnawing from the inside out. I refused to look in the mirror. The reflection had grown wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. Bloated, pale, stretched over bones that no longer seemed mine. My skin hung loose and clammy, as if it had been boiled and left to cool. The newest, discarded skin sprawled across my bed, twisted and lifeless, a corpse dissected and abandoned. Its lips twisted into a leer that mocked every natural expression I'd ever made, teeth crooked and too large for its face. The jaw sagged open, dripping a viscous fluid onto my sheets, the stench acrid and metallic. Its hollow sockets bored into me, accusing, demanding. I couldn't bear it. Something inside snapped. I slammed the door, dragged the blinds down until the room was a darkened tomb, and staggered to the kitchen. My hands found the knife before my mind caught up. The cold steel trembled in my grip as I returned to the mirror, heart hammering. The reflection stared back, and I almost didn't recognize it. The eyes were sunken pits. My lips, cracked and scabbed, quivered against yellowed teeth. My skin, gray, translucent, and slick with sweat, clung to my frame, taut and unnatural, as if it might split at any moment. My fingers shook as I dragged the blade to the seam on my forearm, the line that had appeared days ago, mocking me with its symmetry. I pressed and sliced. Pain erupted, white-hot and electric, but it wasn't what I expected. The sensation burrowed deep, raw and satisfying, scratching an itch buried beneath the skin. The blade slid through the flesh, parting it in a jagged, bloodless line. The skin didn't bleed. It peeled, curling back in thick, mucus-slick layers that made my stomach churn. Beneath it, something pulsed, a living, glistening black mass. The surface shimmered as if oiled, twitching in time with a heartbeat that wasn't mine. It smelled of iron and something sharper, something alive. Breathing heavily, I dug my fingers under the edges of the peeling flesh and pulled. The old skin came away in long, rubbery sheets, each strip making a wet slap as it hit the floor. My jaw clenched against the growing agony, but I couldn't stop. My muscles burned. My vision swam, but I ripped and tore until the ground was littered with fragments of my former self. When I straightened, the thing in the mirror took my breath away. It stood tall, its surface an obsidian ripple of sleek muscle and unearthly symmetry. Tendrils of faint light coursed beneath its surface, illuminating veins that pulsed with a rhythm that felt powerful, infinite. Its eyes glowed faintly, their intensity alien but familiar. They stared back at me, not with fear, but with hunger. The itching was gone. The weight, the sickness, the exhaustion, all gone. What replaced it was sharper, stronger, undeniable. I flexed my fingers, now black and fluid, watching them ripple and contract. Beautiful living shadows. The old skin on the floor quivered, lifeless and grotesque, a shed chrysalis. These weren't warnings. They weren't signs of decay or disease. They were preparations. I hadn't been dying. I'd been transforming. The knife dangled in my hand, forgotten, as I gazed down at the heap of who I'd been. My lips curled into a smile, sharper and wider than it had ever been before. I turned away from the old me, opened the door, and stepped out into the waiting night, scratchy. Hold on, the line went a bit scratchy. Sandy? You're still there? Hi, Sandy. As I was saying, I think we have rats in the house. The night before last we were in bed and some god-awful noise woke me up. And no, it wasn't Ian snoring. You do grow accustomed to such things over 50 years of marriage, believe it or not. No, it was a scratching sound coming from the skirting behind the headboard. So I give Ian a good shove. No luck there. The man would have slept through Pompeii without so much as a twitch, let me tell you. Although, I don't imagine he can be sleeping all that well. That rash is back. I told you about his rash, didn't I? I keep telling him, stop scratching it. But will he listen? Anyway, at first I thought it was the pipes, you know? I swear the water system in this house hasn't been replaced since the Romans. I've told Ian, told him 1,000 times. Ian, I say, we have to get the pipes fixed. One of these days they'll burst, and it'll be me. You and the cats floating around the house on the bloody sofa like it's Noah's Ark. So I get off the bed, and I stoop to listen, and immediately I can tell it isn't the pipes at all. It's quite distinct. The sound of rummaging against the wood like little claws, burrowing. Rats do have claws, don't they? And the thing is, last night I heard the same sound, but this time it was coming from behind the cabinet. You know, the big one. The one with Ian's old tennis trophies. And I didn't even bother trying to wake the lug up this time. No, I jump out of bed, and I pull out the cabinet, and lo and behold, droppings all over the carpet. Not only that, but the same irritating sound started at the other end of the room by the bed again, and not 10 minutes later, in the wall by the phone right where I'm sitting now. Oh, I do hope they aren't chewing through the telephone wires. Aren't telephone wires rat-resistant? I'd hate it if I couldn't talk to you, Sandy. Could that be why the line is scratchy? Speaking of scratchy, I woke up this morning and my scalp was itching all over. Good job Ian's asleep because I've been telling him not to scratch. And here I am scratching so hard my hair's falling out like it's bloody Chernobyl. I wonder if the cats have fleas, but they've never had them before. Oh, I'm so stupid. Of course, it must be the rats carrying the fleas. There are at least 10 of them now, all rummaging around, picking at the plaster, the persistent little buggers. I swear if Ian wasn't here and they all broke through at once, I'd have to call the police. For the life of me, I wouldn't know what the hell to do. I've cleaned the bedroom though, and, oh, by the way, I bought some of those new metal scourers. You know the ones? Everyone said how good they are. I've been all around the tops and the skirting boards with them, one in each hand like a bloody Dalek. Exterminate! Exterminate! They do the job, though. My goodness, the bedroom has never been so spotless. You simply must try them. Sandy, you don't think they'd work on fleas, do you? I'm starting to feel them on my arms and legs as well as in my hair. I hope they don't aggravate Ian's rash. It's already spread up his neck and over his face. I'm looking at him now, the poor little bugger. He hasn't scratched in a while though, bless his soul. A fighter, aren't you, Ian? Ian? He could sleep through Hiroshima and Nagasaki? That man could. Hold on. Goodness, can you hear that? There must be 20 of them now. How do they multiply so quickly? Go away. I don't have any cheese. My husband can't eat cheese. The willful little buggers. Any more, and they'll have the telephone wires, I'm sure of it. If the line goes dead, I'm sorry, love. I'll pop in that phone booth near the pharmacy on Wednesday when I go to get Ian's prescriptions. He's on so many pills now, he rattles when he walks. Not that he walks much. The lug. Let's go for a walk, Ian, I say. But will he listen? Let's get you out of the house, Ian. It'll be good for you. No luck there, Sandy. Let me tell you. Oh, speaking of luck, did you manage to get hold of that exterminator that Ian recommended? You didn't? Ian. Ian! Sandy says the telephone number we gave her for the exterminator is disconnected. It's a bloody shame, Sandy. So, I guess the rats are still there, scratching, burrowing into the woodwork, crawling all around the walls, are they? I bet you can't even sleep of a night, can you? Poor thing. How awfully cruel. How many did you say? 50 now? Jesus, they're multiplying. That's practically the Black Death. What does your husband have to say about all this, Sandy? Surely he... Hang on a second, love. Don't go anywhere. Oh, those new metal scourers do work on fleas. Oh, ooh, that's the ticket. I must call the cats in. They'll be right as rain in no time. Dalek, exterminate, exterminate. Sandy, you're still there? Your husband must have something to say about all this. Ian, Ian, the rats are going to get through and Sandy doesn't know what the hell to do. Ian, wake up, Ian. I'm so sorry, Sandy. The rash has spread all over, bless his soul. Sandy, hello? Hello? Oh no, the line's gone all scratchy. They must have got to the telephone wires. You hear that, Ian? I said they must have got to the telephone wires. Ian, I love you, darling. But goodness, you could sleep through hell itself, you could. Bloody lug. Who sleeps 3 days and 3 nights without so much as a twitch? I know what you need. How about a record? Okay, what do we have here? Aha. Glenn Miller. Perfect. Isn't it scratchy compared to the newer ones? But all the best ones are scratchy, aren't they? Look, darling, I'm dancing. La la, la la la. Can you see me dancing just like I used to? Look at me go. I'm 19 again. Oh, don't mind all the blood. It's only flea's blood. I'll clean it off later with my new scourers. Why don't you get up and dance with me? La la, la la la. Come on, Ian. Ian, wake up. Please wake up. Please wake up. They'll scratch their way in, Ian. They'll get through the walls if you don't wake up. The enchanted reflection. The boutique hummed with the frenetic energy of post-Christmas sales. Shoppers jostled for space, arms laden with discounted luxury goods, their voices blending into a discordant symphony of complaints and excitement. Sarah Jensen stood behind the counter, her forced smile threatening to crack under the weight of another 12-hour shift. Her reflection in the glass display case stared back at her. A pale, tired face framed by hair that refused to cooperate, despite the expensive products she used. Miss, excuse me, miss. A sharp voice cut through the din. Sarah turned to see a woman, her arms stacked with silk scarves, glaring at her. Yes, ma'am. How can I help you? She replied, her voice coated in faux cheer. These are marked as 40% off, but they're ringing up wrong, the woman snapped. Sarah bit her tongue and nodded, mechanically punching the register. The scarf woman wasn't the first difficult customer of the day, and she wouldn't be the last. As she resolved the issue, Sarah's gaze flicked to the far end of the boutique. A figure lingered by the antique mirror display. A woman draped in a long coat, her dark hair veiling her face. She seemed out of place among the boutique's usual clientele. Her movements were deliberate, almost hypnotic, as she traced her gloved fingers along the edge of a large gilded mirror. Miss Jensen! The scarf woman's irritated bark snapped Sarah back to reality. She completed the transaction, apologized for the inconvenience, and handed over the neatly bagged scarves. When she looked back, the mysterious woman was gone. In her place, on the counter near the register, sat a package wrapped in shimmering silver paper. Sarah frowned. Did someone leave this here? She called to her co-worker, Heather, who was restocking handbags. Heather glanced over, shrugged, and returned to her task. Curiosity got the better of her. She picked up the package and turned it over. Her name was scrawled across the silver wrapping in elegant script. Sarah Jensen. Her breath caught. What the? Secret admirer? Heather teased, smirking. Sarah flushed. No idea. She hesitated, then carefully peeled back the paper. Inside was a wooden box with delicate carvings. She unlatched it, revealing an antique hand mirror nestled in velvet. It was breathtaking. The silver filigree frame was adorned with tiny, intricate designs, flowers, vines, and what appeared to be a pair of eyes etched at the top. The glass was oddly pristine, almost luminous. A shiver ran down her spine as she gazed at it. The shop's fluorescent lights dimmed for a brief moment, flickering just enough to make her look around uneasily. Spooky, Heather said, her tone light, but her eyes wary. You gonna keep it? Sarah's fingers lingered on the mirror's handle. She wanted to say no, to put it back in the box and leave it there, but something about it called to her. Yeah, she said softly. It's beautiful. Heather shrugged and returned to the handbags. Sarah slipped the mirror back into its box and placed it in her bag. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of customers and complaints, but Sarah couldn't shake the image of the woman at the mirror display. As she locked up for the night, she glanced over her shoulder one last time. The boutique was empty, save for the faintest impression of a handprint on the glass of the largest mirror. Sarah settled into her apartment, a modest one-bedroom filled with mismatched furniture and an air of functional neglect. The antique mirror sat on her coffee table, its polished silver glinting under the dim light of a single lamp. Her cat, Milo, circled the mirror, sniffing at the velvet-lined box before retreating to his perch by the window. "You don't like it either, huh?" Sarah murmured, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. She couldn't explain why she had brought it home. Something about the mirror tugged at her, a mix of unease and fascination. She reached out hesitantly and lifted it, her fingers tracing the intricate designs along the handle. When she finally looked into it, her breath hitched. The face staring back wasn't hers, or at least, it wasn't the face she was used to. Her reflection was flawless. Her skin glowed with a porcelain smoothness that seemed almost too perfect. Her lips were fuller, her eyes brighter and more alive. Even her hair fell in soft, elegant waves, like something out of an advertisement. She touched her cheek, half expecting to feel the warmth and suppleness of the reflection, but her fingers met the usual uneven texture. Her reflection smiled faintly, though she had not. Her stomach twisted. She set the mirror down quickly and rubbed her eyes. "Long day. I'm losing it," she muttered, but curiosity gnawed at her. She picked it up again. The reflection was the same, perfect. Yet as she studied it, she noticed something disconcerting. Her eyes, they weren't quite right. Behind the radiance lay a coldness, an almost predatory gleam. She tried looking away, but her gaze kept returning to the glass. A soft knock at the door jolted her, breaking the spell. She set the mirror down and crossed the room, peering through the peephole. Lisa stood on the other side, her arms laden with a bottle of wine and a bag of takeout. "Thought you might need cheering up," Lisa said as Sarah opened the door. She kicked off her boots and plopped onto the couch. Sarah forced a smile. "You didn't have to do that." Lisa shrugged. "You've been weird lately. Figured you could use some company." As Lisa unpacked their dinner, her eyes landed on the mirror. "What's this?" "Just something someone left at the boutique," Sarah said quickly. "Weird, right?" Lisa picked it up, turning it over in her hands. "It's gorgeous. Antique?" "Probably." Lisa tilted the mirror toward herself and frowned. "This thing's creepy. It's like..." She trailed off, her face tightening. "Like what?" Lisa handed it back hastily. "I don't know. It just gave me the shivers. You should sell it or something." Sarah laughed nervously. "Yeah, maybe." The two settled in, eating and catching up, but Sarah's attention kept straying to the mirror. After Lisa left, she found herself sitting alone with it again, the room unnervingly quiet. She picked it up one last time before bed. The reflection was still her, but the longer she stared, the less she recognized the person in the glass. It wasn't just the perfection. It was the way the image seemed to breathe, to shimmer faintly, as though it were alive. A single word echoed faintly in her mind. More. Startled, she dropped the mirror. It landed with a dull thud, unbroken. Shaking, she turned it face down and left it on the table. But even as she crawled into bed and pulled the covers over her head, the whispered word seemed to linger in the air. The new year arrived quietly. Sarah had spent the evening alone, ignoring calls from Lisa and other friends, unable to shake her preoccupation with the mirror. It remained on her coffee table, face down, but its presence loomed like a living thing. When she finally picked it up again on January 2nd, the reflection stunned her. It wasn't just her idealized self anymore. Her face in the glass had changed subtly, but undeniably. Higher cheekbones, a sharper jawline, and eyes that gleamed with a confidence she had never possessed. The strangest part? When she stepped into her bathroom and looked into the plain, unenchanted mirror above the sink, she saw the same changes. Her real reflection matched the one in the antique glass. She traced the contours of her cheekbones, marveling at their new definition. Her skin was clear, her lips fuller, her hair shinier. It wasn't as exaggerated as the reflection in the antique mirror had been, but it was unmistakable. The compliments began almost immediately. "Did you do something different with your hair?" Heather asked at work. "You're glowing," a regular customer remarked. Even her boss, who usually ignored her, took notice. "Looking sharp, Sarah. Keep it up," he said with a rare smile. At first, she basked in the attention. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt seen, appreciated, envied. She began to carry herself differently, walking with her head high and a sway in her step. Her wardrobe, once utilitarian, shifted to highlight her changing figure. But there were side effects. Her energy waned, simple tasks left her winded, and dark circles began to form under her eyes, marring her otherwise flawless appearance. No amount of sleep seemed to help. "Are you okay?" Lisa asked one afternoon over coffee. "I'm fine," Sarah said, brushing off the question. "You don't look fine. You look tired and pale." Lisa leaned closer, concern etched into her face. "Seriously, Sarah, have you been to a doctor?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't need to. I'm just busy." Lisa's frown deepened, but she let it drop. At work, Sarah noticed something odd about her coworkers. Heather, who was usually full of energy, appeared drawn and sluggish. Their boss seemed frailer, his usual booming voice reduced to a rasp. Even the regular customers looked subtly diminished, less vibrant, their laughter less frequent. The change was subtle, but once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, clutching the mirror. She didn't want to look into it, but the compulsion was irresistible. When she finally turned it over, her reflection greeted her with a knowing smile. The face was stunning, almost inhuman in its beauty, but the eyes were wrong. They gleamed with a cruel intelligence, and for the briefest moment, Sarah thought the lips moved, mouthing a single word. "Mine." She gasped and dropped the mirror. As it hit the floor, the room seemed to shudder. Milo hissed and bolted under the couch, his fur bristling. Sarah clutched her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. When she dared to look at the mirror again, it lay face down, unbroken. In the silence, a faint whisper slithered through the air. More. By mid-January, Sarah's transformation was undeniable. Her appearance had become the very image of the idealized reflection she'd seen in the mirror. She drew stares everywhere she went, admiration from strangers, envy from colleagues. But the cost was becoming impossible to ignore. Lisa had stopped visiting, her once lively face now gaunt and shadowed. The boutique was eerily quiet, its usual hum of activity dulled by the fatigue of the staff and customers alike. Even Milo, her ever-loyal cat, had grown lethargic, curling into tight balls of fur in dark corners, avoiding her entirely. Sarah's own health was deteriorating. Though her face remained flawless, her body felt like it was withering. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion gripped her, making it hard to even climb the stairs to her apartment. That night, Lisa showed up unannounced, her face pale and her eyes sunken. "We need to talk," Lisa said, pushing past Sarah into the living room. She froze when she spotted the mirror on the coffee table. "Sarah," Lisa began, her voice trembling. "Something's wrong." I've been feeling sick ever since you got that thing. Sarah's stomach twisted. It's just a mirror. No, it's not. Lisa grabbed her by the wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Do you even hear yourself? You look like a goddess, but you're barely standing. Everyone around you is falling apart. Look at Milo. Sarah turned to her cat, curled motionless in the corner. Panic gripped her. She picked him up, his tiny frame alarmingly light. Lisa gestured to the mirror. It's that thing. You need to get rid of it. Tears stung Sarah's eyes. You don't understand. I can't. It's... Her voice broke. It's killing you, Lisa said, her tone firm. And it's hurting everyone else too. For the first time, Sarah truly looked at the mirror, not at her reflection, but at the object itself. The silver filigree seemed darker, tarnished, and the glass shimmered faintly, almost as if it were breathing. She grabbed the mirror and hurled it to the floor with all her strength. The glass shattered, shards scattering across the room. For a moment, everything was still. Then a low, resonant hum filled the air. The shards began to melt, pooling into a dark, inky substance that snaked across the floor like living shadows. Lisa screamed, stumbling backward as the tendrils slithered toward her. Sarah stood frozen, watching in horror as the shadows swirled and coalesced into a humanoid shape. Its form was amorphous, shifting, its surface shimmering like the mirror's glass. Eyes, cold, piercing, and impossibly ancient, locked onto hers. You broke the mirror, the entity said, its voice a chilling symphony of whispers. The gift is not undone, but unleashed. Sarah's legs gave out, and she crumpled to the floor. Please, I didn't know. The entity loomed closer, its voice like frost against her skin. Desire is a binding contract you took without thought, and now the cost is yours to bear. Lisa tried to pull Sarah away, but the shadows lashed out, pinning her against the wall. You will watch, the entity hissed. Sarah's reflection materialized in the dark surface of the creature's form, twisted and grotesque. As she stared, her body began to change. The radiant beauty she had cherished dissolved like smoke, leaving behind a visage that was hollow, gaunt, and lifeless. Her skin sagged, her eyes dulled, and her hair fell in brittle clumps around her. The creature's shadowy form melted into the walls, the room falling silent once more. Lisa rushed to Sarah's side, her hands trembling as she touched her friend's shoulder. Sarah. Sarah turned to her, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. Lisa held her tightly, but her expression was one of horror. The next morning, Sarah was gone. Lisa found only a note on the table, scrawled in shaky handwriting. I can't undo what I've done. The mirror will find another. Please forgive me. The shards of the mirror were gone, as though they had never existed. Miles away, in the display window of a quaint antique shop, an elegant hand mirror sat on a velvet cushion, its silver filigree gleaming and its glass pristine. A small tag hung from the handle, reading, Beauty Beyond Compare, $150. Rachel's Tower, Rachel's Tower. It's hard to imagine that we were all so young once, and how the world stretched out before us with seemingly endless possibilities. My friends and I managed to rent an old house in the now famous wine destination town of Napa, California, in the early 1970s. The town wasn't as famous then as it is now. The house was huge and out of place in the poor neighborhood of small, closely packed dwellings. Two 40-foot date palm trees perfectly framed the front of the house, as well as the spacious covered porch on which we would often sit. The house itself was 2 stories high, wood shingled, had lots of windows, and a large number of small bedrooms upstairs. The house had been there a long time. There were rumors it had once been a house of ill repute sometime in the distant past, but no proof. The truth was that no one really knew why there were so many bedrooms, but it was great for us because the more people the house could accommodate, the cheaper the individual rent. A 3-story wood shingled tower graced the backyard. At the top of the tower was a room that had 4 windows facing each direction. The structure could have been a windmill or pump house at one time, but the blades were long gone, and no one knew what it was currently used for as the landlords had the door padlocked. Many wondered what was in the tower. Sometimes people thought they saw someone in one of the windows at the top, but it was mostly when they were in altered states of mind, which was fairly often due to the frequent parties. So, the sightings weren't taken that seriously. And besides, the only access to the tower was a single door, which was locked from the outside. No one at the house had the key, and the landlords rarely came by since we always managed to pay the rent on time. During the year we managed to stay there before being evicted, there were some epic parties thrown. It was at one of these parties, about 2 months into our stay, that I first met Rachel. My initial encounter with her was undoubtedly influenced by the effects of beer and some killer weed I had just smoked, but nonetheless, she made a powerful impression on me. The first thing I noticed about her was her long, dark, curly hair, which stood in contrast to her almost porcelain skin. However, as she got closer, it was her unusual bluish-green eyes, which seemed to be her most dominant feature. I suddenly felt lost in some type of mental fog, as my whole world seemed to narrow down to the vision of her in front of me. Time came to a stop. I must have been staring at her for some time when a musical voice broke through my stoned stupor. "Charlie, you seem like you are in some kind of trance, or is it just good weed?" She laughed. I was shocked out of my reverie and snapped back to the reality of the party going on around me. On her face was an amused smile, but I still didn't know who she was. "Sorry for staring. You're right. It was powerful smoke." I chuckle. "Forgive me, but I don't think I know you. How do you know me?" "Oh, Charlie, everyone knows your name around here. You're quite the legend." "I am," was the only thing my drug-dulled mind could think of to say. I was kicking myself internally. "Of course you are. It seems your nicknames include Captain Cosmic and Space Cowboy, based on your love of getting stoned and then talking about strange and unusual topics. Isn't that right, Charlie?" She teases me. She's right about that, but I still didn't know who she was, and have never seen her before. "Well, mystery woman, you do know a few things about me, but I still don't know you, or your name. Are you new to town, or do you know someone here?" "Oh, I'm Rachel. And no, I'm not new to town. In fact, I've been here for a long, long time, longer than you can imagine, and I've got some stories to tell." I'm fascinated by this woman and don't know why, but I want to know more. "Rachel, I'm all ears. Let's grab a beer and find a quieter spot to talk." "Well, I picked you out of everyone here because of your reputation for liking the unusual. I hope you're ready for what I have to say, because I do believe in honesty, and I'm certainly out of the ordinary." She smiles. I assured her that I could handle whatever she wanted to say, even though I was already starting to wonder what I had gotten myself into. So, we find a spot in the backyard, by the tower, where it is quieter, since the main party is in the house. She turns down the beer I offered, but tells me the strangest story I had ever heard. I still have trouble wrapping my mind around it. Rachel started off by telling me she is a ghost, and I can't help but laugh. This had to be the most unusual woman I've ever met in my still young life. When my laughter calmed down, she smiled and continued. It seemed like other ghost stories I had heard before. Her large family were the first occupants of the house a little over 100 years ago, and she had died on the property and now found herself bound to it. I'm wondering if this is all she has, so I asked her the obvious question about why she is so solid if indeed she is a ghost. She told me that over the years, with a great deal of practice, she had learned how to project a shell, a manifestation of herself. This I also found a little amusing, until she asked me to feel her pulse. I find nothing in the wrist or neck, and her body, although not cold, is cooler than one would expect. My amusement was dying quickly, and suddenly, I started to feel some real fear. She saw it, and held my hand while telling me she meant me no harm. She said she picked me to tell not only because I might be the most open to who she was, but also because she really liked me. It seemed that she could only maintain her projection for a limited time, and spent most of her existence in the spectral state people typically associate with ghosts. Therefore, she had observed a great deal about all who lived at the house, while being unseen herself. It seemed Rachel had concentrated her observations on me. She asked me if I needed, or could handle, proof positive of who she was. I wasn't sure, but with more reassurance from her, I agreed. So while still holding one of my hands, she smiled and slowly faded into nothingness. My heart rate jumped, and even though I thought I could handle it, the reality proved more difficult than imagined. The shell of what I had considered possible or impossible was suddenly ripped away. There was nothing where her hand had touched mine. Luckily, she reappeared very quickly and hugged me as I slowly calmed down with her seemingly solid body holding mine. When I had recovered and felt more myself, we continued to talk. I got a real feel for the loneliness and isolation she felt being stranded on the property perhaps forever. She didn't know or understand why her spirit couldn't leave. Rachel had only recently been able to perfect her manifestation enough to pass as a living human being. She finally felt it safe to appear at one of our parties, where it would be easy to just blend in without a lot of questions. For her, it felt amazing to finally be able to interact with people after so many years of being invisible to the world. Evidently, she knew a lot about all who lived in the house or visited on a regular basis. Rachel knew more about me than anyone else because she said she liked me from when I first stepped over the threshold of the house. The tower was her special place to be. At the top, she could look out and see what was going on at some distance from the house in all directions. It was the closest she could come to escaping the property and pretending she was part of the wider world. The fact that the landlords kept the door padlocked to prevent injury and liability guaranteed her privacy in the top room. After our first meeting, we would meet on a daily basis for as long as she could maintain her solid form, which would be a few hours at most. Rachel and I collaborated on a cover story to explain who she was, where she came from, what she did, and to answer any other questions that might be asked about her. Luckily, most of those who lived or partied in the house accepted her for who she appeared to be. She quickly became part of the culture of the house, and eventually, most considered her my girlfriend. As time went on, my feelings for her became more and more intense. Unbelievable, I was actually falling in love with a ghost. I tried to bring the outside world to her as much as I could with books, newspapers, music, pictures, and any other thing I could do. One time, I arranged for a beach party in the backyard on a warm summer day. I brought in some sand, beach chairs, large umbrellas, beach balls, and even a recording of waves crashing. We set up a volleyball court and a small above-ground plastic pool filled with cold water. People wore their swimsuits and we played beach volleyball, sat around in the small pool, and played surf music to enhance the mood. Rachel loved it and stayed as long as she could maintain her form. Thanks, Charlie. This is great. It gives me just enough to imagine I'm at the beach again. She hugs me, and I almost feel she is really alive. Well, you do look awfully hot in that bikini I got you. Not like a ghost at all. You know just the thing to say to make a spook feel sexy. She teased and kissed me. My friends and roommates came to accept her, as one of us and she reveled in it. She seemed to have fallen as much in love with me as I had with her. Our intimacy was limited because of her situation, but that didn't seem to matter that much to either of us. There was something much deeper going on. It was so strange and surreal that I was the only one who knew what she really was, and I couldn't tell anyone else. Of course, all good things come to an end sooner or later. Given the way we partied and the previous warnings we had from our landlord and police, it was just a matter of time before we were kicked out of the house. Rachel and I knew it would happen, and we tried to get in as many good times and memories in before it did. Obviously, we were both very sad about parting, and our last day together was full of tears. We tried to formulate plans to meet up periodically after the eviction. The difficulty was, she couldn't leave the property, which would now be rented by others, and I couldn't come on the property without trespassing. After being evicted, I would walk by the property on pre-arranged days on the front sidewalk. If possible, and no one was looking, Rachel would appear as close to the sidewalk as she could, and we would talk. If we could get close enough to each other, we could kiss or hold hands for a short time. We did this for years, whenever it could safely be arranged. I got on with my life, went to college, married, got a teaching job, had children, and grew old. During this time, I still would meet her when I could. I was growing older and older, yet she remained eternally young. Several times I found excuses to walk my wife or kids by the house so Rachel could see them. She was never jealous and understood that there were things she couldn't give me, and I had to live my life. Rachel was always glad for me, while I secretly felt bad for her. She was bound to the property for eternity and denied any type of real life. As my life became more crowded and complicated due to work and other concerns, I visited less and less, but never stopped entirely. Eventually, my kids left the house, got married, and had jobs in other places. I saw them less and less, and phone calls or internet were not the same. My wife died, my health took a turn, and my time was limited. I became the old man I never thought I would become. Now, it is late night, and I have secretly arrived onto the property. I am sitting against the tower, and Rachel is by my side, holding my hand. I reach for the pills that will release me and swallow them down. Leaning my head against Rachel, I wait and hope the property will accept me, drowning in the milk of the moon. I try to roll off the checkered blanket as Daddy desperately tries to wipe the sticky drips of mint chocolate from my ice cream-coated face before it reaches the new white blouse left exposed to stains. I promised your mom I wouldn't stain your shirt before dinner, he said, leaning down to whisper the words in my ears. I giggle, squirming in his arms. My eyes drift past the nearly empty playground to a pair of eyes in the bushes. The setting sun makes them glow. Daddy, look! The bush has eyes! He glances at where I'm pointing, and the eyes disappear. I gape after them. Nothing there, he says distractedly, going after my face with the wipes again. Now stop squirming, little worm. I giggle again, finally staying still for him to wipe half the mess off my face. The playgrounds are empty now. Movement catches my eye. Feet on the cold, crunchy grass. They're held by tearing sandals. "Daddy, look," I say, pointing at the owner of the feet. A girl stumbles towards us. He turns his head, startling when he sees the girl. Immediately he turns to me. "Go play on the playground, Lily. And don't get your shirt dirty," he says strictly. "All right, Daddy," I say, planting my bare feet on the ground. I hurl myself towards the empty slides. When I manage to climb the slide, I look back out at Daddy. I can just make out his words to the girl. He's asking her how old she is. She says she's 17, gasping hysterically and glancing behind her frantically. What's wrong with her? I look down the slide, my eyes widening. The slide stretches out to the sharp mulch. "Daddy, I can't get down." A small whimper escapes me as I look up. The girl is holding a knife. I'm not allowed to use those. Daddy raised his hands in the air. Speaking softer, she looks up at my cry. Daddy tries to move in front of her. "Oh no," she says with a laugh. "Is that your daughter? Don't you dare touch her." He snarls. She laughs, grabbing Daddy and dragging him towards the slide. They're standing at the bottom when I speak. "Who are you?" I ask. She smiles pure delight on every inch of her face. "Do you know what a serial killer is?" she asks. I shake my head no. Well, I go around, and when I see someone with pretty eyes, she brings the knife to Daddy's throat. I frown again. Knives are dangerous. She should be more careful. I take them out of people. That way I can look at them forever. "Why do you have a knife?" "Knives are dangerous," I say. "Can you help me down? I'm stuck up here," I say. "No!" Daddy bursts out. "Lily, go the other way. Run!" "No," the girl says. "We won't." "Do you know what color your eyes are?" she asks. I look at Daddy. He looks scared. "They're quarter-colored," I say, reluctantly looking back at the girl. The girl laughs pure delight in every bit of the sound. "You and your daddy's eyes are wonderful." She looks at Daddy, throwing him a smile. "Lily, that's your name, right?" "Yes," I say. She smiles, laughing again. "They're gray, like the milk of the moon, an ink-black iris drowning in the milk of the moon." She gives a soft groan of pleasure. "Oh, that just sounds so beautiful, doesn't it, Lily?" My eyebrows creased in confusion. The moon doesn't have milk. She sighs. "Well, I think it's time to cut this meeting short. Where are you going?" She smiles. "Well, after I take your daddy's eyes, I'll go find a nice, pretty pair of amber ones." "How will you take Daddy's eyes?" "I'll cut them out," she says. "Just like this." She presses the tip of the knife to the skin just below his fuzzy eyebrows. He tells me to cover my eyes just before he starts screaming. 16 years, 43 days, 19 hours, and 37 minutes later. "Hey, Lily, how are you doing?" I startle, looking up to see Mary on the other side of the receptionist's desk. "Hey, Mary, I'm all right. Why?" She slides a newspaper article onto my desk, dragging her eyes from mine. IRISSTRIKESAGAIN. The famous Boston serial killer, nicknamed Iris for her obsession with her victim's eyes, strikes again. This time taking the life of a 43-year-old businessman, Trevor Clint, was found with his eyes carved out of his face and left dead. This victim sported violet eyes, a very rare eye color brought on by albinism. He was a family man, survived by his 2 daughters and wife. The police force wants to reassure the public they are doing everything they can to stop Iris. Anyone with any information on Iris is asked to come forward to police or call the following number. I slide the newspaper away before I can read anymore. Bullshit. They haven't done crap to find her. She's been roaming around, killing man after man. Half the world is too stuck up to believe that it's a her. The other half is so busy being offended by the misogynistic asses who refuse to accept it. Could be a woman they forget that the real problem is the serial killer. The police force is too worried about drunk teenagers and day-late taxes that nobody bothers to look for her until they don't have the eyes to look. I'm taking the day off, I say sharply. Mary opens her mouth for a moment, then shuts it. I clench my teeth, grabbing the newspaper, and quickly slip it into my bag. I navigate the room full of sympathetic eyes. I hate eyes. Hate them more than anything else on the human body. Hate the way they move. Hate the way they follow every movement. More than anything, I hate the way they look when they're carved out of someone's head. I rap on the door to my boss's office. His muffled voice gives me permission to enter. I walk into his office, head downcast. He looks up from a call, sympathy immediately crossing his face. I hate sympathy as well. Hate it more than the whispers, the news articles, the interviews. Sympathy and eyes, my 2 worst enemies. I bite back a bitter, deranged laugh at that. I grit my teeth, putting on my best, the daughter of that dead guy voice. One I quickly realized got me farther than a bristly, angry snap. I'd like the rest of the day off. I lower my voice to a whisper for extra effect. Of course, Lily, he says quickly. We're all here if you need us. I don't put the effort into faking a smile. Just nod softly, mutter a thank you, and leave the office. In the lobby, I glance in a mirror, stare at my eyes, the same eyes that got carved out of my father's head. An ink-black iris drowning in the milk of the moon. I turn away before I break something. I walk out of the office and glance at the clock. I have 2 hours to get there, and 2.5 hours before dark. 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 49 seconds later. A figure clad in black slips next to me. I've been sitting on this bench for an hour. The water's soaked through my jeans to my flesh. Shivers run through my body. Glad to see you again, Lily, she says. There's something about her voice, always moments away from bursting into a cruel, mocking laugh. It feels like a knife dragged across teeth. I shudder, glad the shivering covers it. I grip the knife in my pocket, looking at the last children leaving the playground. The same one I sat at 10 years ago. Mint chips still sticky on my lips as this woman murdered my father. I've seen her 4 times since then. None of them had been by my own will. This time's different. I watch the children, trotting after their mother, giggling and tripping over each other with the promise of sweets and safety back in their home. Not going to talk to me? She asks, leaning back boredly. I ignore her, watching until the children slip into their car before I speak. What do you want? Iris smiles. Ah, there it is. That voice. Almost as nice as your eyes. I tense, clenching my teeth until they hurt. What? I hiss. Do you want? Oh, come on, darling, she says with a laugh. We both know these meetings have been about you since I killed your daddy. What was his name? She searches the air. Ah, Carl? My hand slips on the blade in my pocket. It cuts my hand open as I lurch, throwing myself off the bench. My voice turned to a furious, animal-like snarl. You keep his name out of your damned mouth. I snarl. My hand comes out of my pocket, dripping blood. She looks at it, then laughs. Standing up, she walks up to me, leaning in so I can feel her breath on my nose. I can smell it. I'd always imagined her breath smelling like rotting flesh, like death, like power. Instead, it smells like mint, almost like she's just eaten a piece of gum. Ah, what are you going to do? Kill me? She coos, taking my bleeding hand in hers. She inspects it in the quick fading light. Sad Lily. Pathetic, really, but I'm not one to toy with my meal. That includes name-calling. I snap. My unoccupied fist curls in on itself and slams into her head. She reels from the hit, staying on her feet and launching back to retaliate. I bring the knife out of my pocket and start swinging at her. I've gotten her in the head, the arm, the leg. Thump, thump, thump. Every single kick I land brings complete, utter euphoria. It's a high I've never experienced. She stumbles, hitting the ground. I drop to my knees and punch her in the jaw. Over and over. She still struggles as I take the duct tape I bought out of my bag and press the adhesive over her mouth, tying her hands behind her and wrapping her ankles to stop her kicking. Then I yank her hood down, looking into her eyes. They're not afraid, just angry. I stiffen. This was the moment I dreamed of. I wanted to see the fear in her eyes. They're perfectly, utterly plain. Not rare, not beautiful, just there. Muddy, plain eyes. Unbridled, burning rage makes it hard to focus. I feel dizzy. Dizzy is such a good way. All the pain gone, my only focus on how to hurt this monster. How's it feel? I whisper, a laugh escaping my throat as I lean down to speak in her ear. Let me tell you, Iris, you are not getting away today. You are dying, whether I drown you in the milk of your damn moon. I take a moment to take out a lighter, watching its glint in the slow glint against the moonlight. Or I might burn you. I haven't decided how yet, but it will happen. She doesn't waver, her eyes never moving. The nerve she has does something to me, clouds my judgment. Then, peace. I know exactly what to do. I take the knife, and watching her face, I do the one thing I know will work. I press it into the flesh under her eyebrows, just like she did to my father 16 years ago. And I listen to her scream, a noble death. The end has got to be close now, my end, the end of a life. I still had hope not that long ago, but beaten down, tortured, abused, and humiliated, not anymore. I lie here in the dark and can only wonder what I have done to deserve this cruelty, and wonder what comes next. This makeshift graveyard is so cold. By the few dim lights, I can see the hundreds, maybe thousands of others, just like me. More are brought and dumped here every day. We cling to life with whatever little bits of energy we have left. 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, I've lost track of the days. My life was relatively normal. Yes, it was culling season, that dreaded time that comes every year when the days grow ever shorter and cold weather sets in. So I was somewhat worried, I confess. But I had survived so many seasons now that I was one of the biggest left, maybe even too big to be chosen. The people who came, the choosers, almost always favored the fairest ones. those of a certain age, about 12 to 15. I was 19 and far from fair. In fact, I was deformed. An accident when I was 7 had left an ugly scar, a bald and mangled patch too prominent to hide. Over the years, others had made fun of me with horrible names and mocking chants. It didn't help that back then I was also one of the smallest of those my age. The few elders left in our homestead tried to assure me that my size was normal, telling me that my kind simply grew slower and would catch up in time, that even my scars would fade, so much so that eventually no one would even notice. I never completely believed them, even though I wanted to. Elders like to fib, to try to make the young feel better, or alternately to scare them into behaving with their wild stories about the great harvester or the horrors of the burning winds. I guess I'm about to find out if any of those childhood tales are true. Even if my captors don't put an end to me soon, I know I can't last much longer, malnourished and exposed to the elements as I have been. Will the great harvester actually come for me to judge my life? I survived a glimpse of the burning winds, if only barely. Will I see them again at the end, in their full wrath? I try to suppress such horrible thoughts, but can't for long. Just the cold itself is almost unbearable now. And to think, up until a few weeks ago, I had never known what true cold really felt like. My whole life, or at least as far back as I could remember, I had lived on the farm. Broad fields surrounded by beautiful rolling hills with streams of the clearest water. It was all I had ever known, my home. If not for the culling, it would have been paradise. This year's choosers had already been coming for a few days, but their assessment of me so far had done nothing but reassure my beliefs. Most discounted me on size alone, with barely a glance. But others, likely those few who did seek a larger specimen, would be excited at first. They would often come up on my good side, maybe wondering how such a tall and rugged choice was still available, only to be disappointed after a closer look. During the culling, my scar was my salvation. In my youth, I had always wished that I could hide it, but now I wanted to turn my deformed side toward everyone who passed by, shove it in their faces, and dare them to pick me. "Look at the freak," I would have shouted if I had been able. "Take me. I dare you." With each new day, my confidence that I would live to see another year on the farm grew, until they showed up. There was nothing particularly special about them. The 4 of them talked among themselves as they walked among the rows, or at least 3 of them did. The smallest ran about wildly playing in the new fallen snow, ignoring the shouts of the others directed toward him. I could not understand their language, and could only guess at their intentions by their expressions and gestures. The tallest of them walked past with a typical shrug and roll of his eyes when he spotted the bare area so prominent on my backside, but the woman walking next to him surprisingly stopped and lingered. The man turned back. These 2 stood beside me, not angrily arguing, but obviously in disagreement. Their gesturing and so blatantly pointing out my imperfections was rather embarrassing. So since I could not turn away, I shifted my attention to the 4th member of the group, a younger woman. She had taken over the group's attempts to curb the smallest one's rowdiness, and like myself, seemed inclined to ignore the couple's discussion. For some reason, I felt a strange kinship with her, though we had nothing in common except perhaps that we were of a similar age. Distracted as I was, the cold bite of sharpened steel teeth slicing into me came as a complete surprise. I would have screamed aloud in pain and defiance if I had a mouth, but a voice is not an ability of mine. If I had either arms or legs, the tools of mobility, I would have fought back. Unable to protect myself, the sawing continued, cutting straight through the heart of me from one side to the other. Toppling to the ground, the view I had known for my entire life shifted dramatically in a sickening lurch, twisting sideways as I fell and landed in the snow. Cut in half, savagely severed from my underground parts, I truly felt the cold for the first time in my life. It started at the raw, fresh amputation wound in my trunk, shooting up my nearly 9 foot of height, flowing through every branch and needle. Instinctively, I reached out for the subterranean warmth of the soil, only to find more cold and frigid air in its place. Brutally exposed to the elements like never before, I was dragged helplessly through the snow. They hauled me toward the barn, the one that I had looked at in the distance day after day, since I had grown tall enough to peek over the edge of the hillside. The familiar faces of the farming family waiting there briefly gave me hope that I could still be rescued. But they seemed friendly with the tormentors who were stealing me away, even helping them to throw me on top of their curious wagon and lash me down. Riding atop the wagon, we moved slowly away, the only home I had ever known receding behind me. But this was just the beginning of my ordeal. I was taken to their strange shelter and propped up in a corner in some bizarre mock replanting. Over the next several weeks, I was subjected to all manner of humiliation. I was bound with both lighted and glittery cords, had objects of all shapes and sizes hung from my branches, and even made to wear a silly sculpted version of a tiny woman with wings on top of me. I was starved, dehydrated, and deprived of sunlight. My only small consolation was that, inside their shelter, I was able to stay warm. Along with the abuse, the group made me the focal point in odd rituals. They liked to sit in the room with me, either staring vacantly into the lights wrapped around my torso, or watching a slender lighted box on the wall showing pictures of other people and places. And each day, boxes of all shapes and sizes, wrapped in colorful designs, were placed beneath me until they were stacked so high that they crowded against my lower branches. One evening, when only the 2 eldest of the group were there, they laid on the floor beside me, stripped off their outer coverings, and proceeded to wrestle and rub against one another for some unknown purpose. After the initial humiliation of being bound and adorned, I was little more than a silent witness to the weeks of bizarre events at the shelter. They all seemed to culminate one morning when, with all the members present, the boxes were torn open and their contents examined. Each member had a stack they processed, then stacked up whatever had been inside before hauling it away. They all seemed to take great pleasure in this particular exercise. After the day of the box openings, interest in me faded. The lights wrapped around me were turned off that night, and not turned back on the following morning, or the next. No one sat gazing dreamily at me, or laid beneath my branches, and no new boxes were set underneath. For nearly a week, I stood in the corner, ignored. Then one evening, for no apparent reason, I was noticed again. The woman turned on my lights, turned off all the other lights in the room, and she and the man sat across from me. They talked for hours, occasionally looking my way and drinking from a couple bottles until both had fallen asleep. I should have been worried that this renewed interest in me could bring with it new hardships, but I didn't have the will to care. Cut off from the earth, I was hungry, and I was so dry. The woman had thought to give me water once, but only once. That had been weeks ago. My needles had started to turn brown and become brittle. Some of the lights binding me were different than the others, and they gave off more heat. This had felt rather good weeks ago, but now they were becoming uncomfortably warm, almost hot. One spot in particular bothered me. Uncomfortable quickly rose to painful, and the small spot began to spread larger and larger. A new light began to flicker in dancing orange flares among my branches, emitting willowy black puffs at its edges. I recognized the description of the black wisps called smoke and the yellow-orange flashes of light known as fire. Great Harvester. It was the burning winds, that fearsome force that engulfed entire mountainsides in searing flame, consuming whole populations of pines. But this was how they started, we were taught. A small flame now, it would grow, and grow quickly. But what could I do? The pain intensified. Nothing in life had prepared me for this. The injury from my youth, no comparison to the agony I felt now. The man and woman slept on. I did not know if their kind could do anything to combat the burning winds, but they were animals, able to move and react, do things that a mobile life like me couldn't, so it might be possible. But how to wake them? Never had I wished so much to have a true voice. Desperately, I yearned to scream into the night, to sound the alarm. As my branches burned and the destruction spread, the heat became excruciating. The walls and ceiling of the shelter started to blacken around me. I tried in vain to scream, to cry out at both the pain and injustice of it all. Flames lashed at the winged figure that sat atop my highest point. As she melted and fell, from somewhere near the very top of me, a wailing siren shriek suddenly burst forth, piercing the night and demanding attention. The man and woman both awoke quickly with the blaring noise, jumping up to action or escape. I didn't know which. The undulating noise persisted. The man and woman had been asleep. There were no signs of the other two, and I could find no other source for it. Could it be? Was it possible that this noise was coming from me? The man returned carrying a red can, stood back, and sprayed a dense cloud at the flames. The cloud was cold and smelled odd. To my amazement, it quenched most of the burning winds. The woman soon reappeared with a bucket of water, ran right up to me, coughing and sputtering, but splashing or pouring water on any bits of fire that remained or tried to rekindle. If this alarming wail was indeed coming from me, I couldn't stop. I didn't know how it had started, and now I couldn't stop it. The excitement was dying out with the burning winds, but the wailing remained. Wounded, coated in residue from the cloud, I was so exhausted that at first I didn't see the young woman coming at me, brandishing a long stick. She swung it back and forth, beating at my top branch, but missing and striking the ceiling of their shelter. Whether her actions sufficiently scared me, or I simply ran out of energy, after a few moments of her flailing, the screaming finally stopped. In the dark and quiet that followed, they huddled together, staring at me. Their actions had successfully beaten back the burning winds, but without the warning alarm, would they have come too late? Had I played a part in the response? If so, would they recognize my contribution and maybe take pity on me? They left slowly. I spent the night wondering. It was a somber group the next day who stripped me bare. Most everything that had hung from my branches was tossed carelessly into a single tall drum. Very few items were packed back in their original smaller containers. I was in a truly sorry state. Nearly half my branches were gone, burned away from my side. I was blackened and charred, the little moisture that had remained in me driven out by the heat. Once the remains of the bindings had been removed, the man wrapped a large piece of cloth about me, pulled me down, and roughly shoved me back out into the cold. Outside, he dragged me a good distance away from the shelter, as if to banish me from sight. I could only guess that since the burning winds had started with me, they were blaming me for the damage. I wanted to tell him the truth, but didn't try to speak again. Even if I had been able to speak, I knew that he wouldn't be able to understand, just as I heard them speak many times, but had no idea what they were saying. He left me there and sulked away, not saying a word to me either. 2 men in a large wagon picked me up and brought me here, along with so many others. I thought at first that this was a punishment for what had happened, but now I believe that this place would have been my destiny anyway. We lay in piles upon the stony ground, unable to even feel the comfort of a bit of soil beneath us. In the 2 days I have been here, I have seen entire piles hauled to the far end of the yard. A terrible noise comes from there. The sun is up now, and the tractor-like machine that carries us away is coming for me. It lifts me up with a stack of my kinfolk and moves us toward the dreadful noise. As we approach, I can see men standing next to a large machine. I watch in horror as a man lifts a noble fir such as me, but still green and full and perfectly shaped. No matter. He feeds the poor tree into the machine, its grinding noises dropping just a fraction as if it might choke. But no, from its other end, it spits chips out into an ever-growing pile, our final resting place, though it hardly qualifies as restful. I am dumped next to the men, and before I even have time to panic, I am grabbed and carried forward. I can see into the machine now, see the spinning and glistening teeth that will be my demise. I look away in terror, but then we stop. When I dare look again, I see another man standing next to the machine, shaking his head and pointing back over his head. The men holding me start walking in the direction the other has pointed. I don't know what is happening, as I am hauled past all the other fallen trees awaiting their fate, carried to the very edge of the yard. I am cast down a hillside into a ravine. I land and slide clumsily the last few feet to the bottom, where a small creek flows through weeds and fallen leaves. There is very little snow here, but what there is on the sloped hill is pure and white. I can still hear the machinery grinding away above me, but the sound is muffled and faint, almost in another world. Because I have been transported out of the hell that was my life since being stolen from the farm, back to a world that I can understand. I am shocked, injured, as close to death as is possible, half burned away with no hope of recovering. But I have been released. Has all this suffering brought me to this place? Am I to be allowed to die a dignified, honorable death? Have I earned the right to lie upon the earth like one of the great sentinels of the forest, those that grow hundreds of feet and live hundreds of years before they finally fall to the forest floor and slowly, slowly pass back into it, until finally, just a brittle husk remains, a home for some small creatures, or sustenance for future generations. If such a restful end is to be mine, then I can be at peace with that. A noble end,